sick.
So before we call the meeting to order, I'll give everybody a little bit of a idea of what we're gonna do tonight until Tracy gets in. The ladies up front that have the presentation prepared are from Lockton, the salary study folks that did the salary study for Carthage Water and Electric, and so they're gonna give kind of an overview of the salary study, where they're at. It's not completed yet, but they're gonna give a little bit of an overview of the salary study. And then we're gonna go through the water and electric budget. And then after that, we will go through the changes that we talked about the other night in the budget. And Tracy will update us on those numbers. And then hopefully we'll get out of here before midnight. Well, 10 o'clock. I think it was almost 10 the other night. But as soon as Tracy gets in, we'll call the meeting to order.
9:38 at this county.
9:38, yeah. Yeah.
I just texted him. I thought he was gonna be here.
So I'll call the May 22nd Budget Ways and Means Committee to order. First item on the agenda is old business. We'd entertain a motion to approve our minutes from our May 13th meeting.
I move we approve the minutes of the May 13th meeting.
Motion to approve the minutes of our previous meeting. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. I didn't have any citizens' participation on the agenda for tonight. As I mentioned earlier, under new business, we're gonna start with the ladies from Lockton, giving us an overview of the Carthage Water and Electric Plant's salary study. So Chuck, would you like to
Yeah,
introduce?
if you don't mind. Yeah, I'll tell you, this has been a very eye-opening experience. I think I've been a part of several compensation studies over the years for different organizations that I work with. And I don't know that I've not seen a more complete, more professional process than what Lockton has done to this point for us. Money well spent, and every sense of the term. We are extremely pleased with how thorough they have been to this point, and have outlined and been a good partner to work with in a process that is very complicated in a utility world. We're extremely happy for them to be here tonight to provide this overview to the group, to the committee. We have Angie Bellers and Katie Moore with Lockton. Mary Mosqueda, who normally is traveling, I think, today, so
Yep.
she's unable to make that. So at this point in time, I'll turn it over to Katie and let her go.
Awesome. Hi everyone, welcome. So today what we're gonna do is Angie and I are gonna go through the project and how we got to where we are today. It's kind of a very high overview of the process we take and the things that we do when we're creating a salary compensation system, such as we did with Carthage. Okay, so he kind of already introduced us. But here's our picture, so you can kind of see what Mary looks like. The only person we didn't touch on is Allison Porter. She's our client advocate. She works with a lot of different on our projects when we work with utilities. She's a great resource when we're going through the custom survey, the questions we should be asking. She's on our benefits side, so she brings another aspect to the compensation practice. Oops. Okay. The Carthage project team consisted of the people on the screen, so Mayor Dan Reif, the City Administrator Greg Dagnan, and if I pronounce any of their names wrong, I'm so sorry. Assistant City Administrator Tracy Cox, Councilmember Mark Elf, Councilmember Ellen Stone. We had the board president for CWEP, Brian Schmidt, and then the secretary, Dan Collier, and then Chuck himself on the project team. These were all agreed on and appointed by the mayor. They did a wonderful job. They were helping assist us in the beginning phases of the project. We were doing a custom survey, so they were meeting with us on a weekly basis, going through what those questions would look like, who our peer groups were going to be. They were very engaged in the project. They were very thorough and organized, and they were a great partnership. Once we got past the custom survey, the group got a little bit smaller. So we're going to give you kind of an overview of Lockton. For those who don't know who Lockton is, we are the largest privately held human capital firm in the world. With a 3.1 billion global revenue. We have over 65 clients worldwide with a 97% client retention rate. We are a family-owned organization, and we are not driven necessarily quarterly. I think this is the right presentation. Sorry, guys. Okay. I don't think that's the right presentation. Anyways, so we have over 10,000 employees. We are the 10th largest global broker, and I'm going to say this is not a claim to fame, but I'm pretty proud to work at Lockton. We've hit for 15 years consecutive one of the most sought places to work, or best places to work. A little bit about the Lockton practice. So we are a full service compensation and total rewards practice. We work with clients in the nonprofit, for-profit, and public sector industries. Our services include a broad-based compensation, performance management, executive comp, international compensation, incentive comp, and salary management. So on this next slide, this is a little bit more detail. I won't go into every single bullet point in this, but this is kind of what our repertoire kind of houses. So if you want any additional information on what some of those services might be, we can definitely follow up with anybody on that and get that information to you. So some of our representative clients in this space, you see city utilities, Metropolitan, Clearwater. We work with a lot of cities. These are just a small sample of the clients that we do work within the utility and city space. So we do have a lot of experience with where you guys are. I'm going to stop there really quickly, and I'm going to ask if there's any questions. I'll check in with you as we get down this process, or feel free to stop me if you do have a question. Interruptions are fine. So any questions? And I take silence as acceptance. Okay. All right, so here's our project overview. This is just a brief, we'll go into these slides a little bit more in depth coming up, but this is just kind of, like I said, it's an overview. So what we did first is we wanted to be the most effective partner, so we spent time to understand the team's culture and the business objectives at Carthage. This helped us kind of develop a compensation philosophy. We conducted a job analysis of the roles within the organization and surveyed the market using both published as well as custom survey with the peers. After we had pulled all of the data together, we then created a market competitive salary structure and slotted the roles into the structure to ensure there was external competitiveness as well as internal alignment. Once the roles were slotted into the structure, we worked with the team to model out what the implementation for the new program would cost. So that's the last bullet point, and that's the last big deliverable, and essentially why we're here today. And then after that, we're in the process of establishing best practices. We're still working through the last two pieces of this project. And again, we'll go into a little bit more depth of what each of these steps means. All right, the first step that we got into was getting to know Carthage as a whole as an organization. During this discovery call, we discussed project goals, what the deliverables were going to be, the expectations, the timelines of all of the deliverables. We discussed who Carthage attracts and loses for talent within the utilities industry and as well as outside of it, because we all know that some roles can cross over different organizations and different industries. We got to understand what was currently working, what was open for change in the compensation system, and from a strategy and tools perspective that were used. With this knowledge, we were able to facilitate a dialogue for the future compensation goals within Carthage. So the job analysis, basically, we got our hands on the job descriptions. When we say job analysis, we reviewed the job descriptions for each of the roles. We got the employee demographic information, and we were able to identify if any titles needed to be collapsed. If they have similar responsibilities, we would consider them a collapsible role, or if any additional titles needed to be created for leveling. We did identify some of these areas. Using the census information, we created a benchmark list that was representative of Carthage CWEP's workforce and to take to the market for market pricing. So you're probably wondering what's the purpose of a benchmark list. The benchmark list is to sample the market so we can paint a picture of how Carthage compares in compensation. This helps us identify a market target for the compensation philosophy if one was not established, which that was part of this particular exercise. When we're creating a benchmark list, we approach this in multiple ways. We look at salaries from high to low across all departments or divisions and the jobs that are commonly found in the market. The next slide is about market pricing. So this is going into published data. We'll get into the custom survey information in a few more slides. So we identified 30 positions within Carthage, and that covered about 53% of the population. So that was a good coverage to give us a good data point to make a competitive salary structure. We reviewed and compared job descriptions against the profiles we found in the published data, and we looked for a 70% match. So if the profiles match what the job is doing 70%, that's considered industry standard of a good match for that role. For each benchmark job, we use 3 to 5 survey sources to build a tightly correlated composite. So the composite is the title with multiple survey sources inside of it to create that market number. For the utility specific roles, we leverage the APP and the AWWA surveys that was provided by Carthage, as these are really good industry standard surveys, and they were also aligned with the published data that we already have in our wheelhouse. Depending on who you lose to and draw from a particular role, we would scope the data to similar organizations, scoping to industries such as utilities, non-for-profit, and general industry. We look at operating budget, which was 40 million in this particular situation. And then we also look at a number of employees, which was 88. The general industry, just in case you wanted to know, general industry is used for we call them kind of commodity roles. That'll be your HR, your finance, your accounting, and some IT, as long as they're not like super niche to the utilities. We would use general industry because you can lose and draw across organizations in any of those industries. They're not industry specific roles. For the custom survey, we actually did a very similar methodology with that. We also surveyed.
Need to change this.
What do you mean?
Needs to change this.
Oh, I was gonna, Here's the published survey sources that we use. As you can see, we also included CWEP's 2 sources that they provided us. Again, we use 3 to 5 surveys to make a composite. You'll see that there's a Mercer, there's a couple of different Mercers. We would never use 2 Mercers in one composite. We tried to do like one of each, 3 to 5. That gives us the best correlation and the best data and to stack up against to make that salary structure. We take great pride in our survey data and the ability to compile a large sample using the main survey sources used in the comp world today. We also spend over $300,000 a year on survey sources for these particular engagements. Any questions before we get into the custom survey? Okay. So the custom survey, we worked with the project team to identify the peers that we wanted to survey. So we identified local and national peers. There were 35 from Missouri, Arkansas, and Oklahoma, and 26 that were part of the APPA Diamond Standard. Is that right, Chuck? Diamond Standard?
Yeah, RP3 done.
So we sent the survey out to all of them. How we did that is we worked with the project team, we asked the questions, what do you want to ask our peers? What's important to us? Then once the survey is built, we submit to the peers for participation. We left the survey open for about 4 weeks to allow people to answer the questions and get the information back to us. Once we received that information, we downloaded it and we compiled it, and we created a report specific for Carthage that excluded their information, and then we created reports for all of the participating peers for free for participating. This incentivizes them to continue to participate if you were to do this year after year. There were 16 positions that were identified in the custom survey. We had 25 participating peers. So I really want to talk about the peers. We had 51 that we sent the questions to. 25 answered it. 50% participation rate is huge. We don't normally see those kinds of numbers. So I'm going to say thank you to Chuck and team for doing their due diligence and making those phone calls and helping push those participants into working with us. The last methodology on this tab is in market data. Big wheelhouses like Mercer, they get a lot of data points for a particular role. And best practice is to throw out your outliers, your really high highs, your really low lows, so that it's not skewing the data. Because the peer data was kind of coming all over the place, we followed a very similar methodology as published data does, and we threw out the high and the low if there was a large spread between them. So we followed the best practice that you would see with Mercer and Willis and the other major published houses. Oh, on this slide, we had 50% participation rate from the AP, or 52 participation rate from the APP peers, and 48 from the local peers. So just so you were wondering what those breakouts were. Here is the list of the peers that did participate. We have designation of who was the APP and who was the local. So we have a pretty broad list. And then here were the invitees who chose not to participate, whether they started it and didn't finish it, didn't open it, or just didn't want to participate. So we don't know if for whatever reason. We do know that with the bigger industries or the bigger corporations like General Mills, and those are going to be a little bit harder because they are a national. They don't have just one location, so it's hard pinpointing who you need to contact.
And sometimes they just don't want to share
Yeah.
information.
Yeah. All right, so geographic differentials.
So I did want to point out, you have to take in consideration of your location, especially when we're gathering data, market data to build a salary structure off of, and comparing you to market data. So when we gather market data, whenever we're pricing our jobs from our published surveys, all of that's coming in at a national level. And we actually have to get an apples to apples comparison, so we have to adjust to your cost of labor. A lot of people get it confused of what the difference between cost of labor is and cost of living. So cost of labor is going to be the supply and demand for your local labor market. So what that competitive rate is that you have to pay in order to get someone in the door to keep them there. Cost of living is going to be something a little bit different. So what that's comparing is just the cost of goods in an area, of your lifestyle. So you're thinking of taxes, utilities, renters insurance in general, groceries. So taking all that in consideration, it comes into cost of labor because if people couldn't afford in the area that they're living in, but there's going to be locations where if you look at the cost of labor, it's going to be higher compared to the cost of living, or vice versa. So for Carthage, it's 95% when you're comparing to the national average. National meaning it's at 100%, that's your baseline. St. Louis, we're from St. Louis, and St. Louis is right at the national level. However, some places in California, they're gonna be 120%. So they'll be 20% higher than the national average, or 20% higher than St. Louis. So if I were to go to California, I may get a 20% pay increase. Hopefully, you can live in a place where your cost of labor's higher and your cost of living's lower. Carthage is a little bit, I think it's 5% difference. So Carthage, to be competitive, we're paying at 95% of the national average, so 5% lower than national. So when we adjusted the national market data and compared it to Carthage, we took it down 5%. So that's how we build our salary structures, and I think the next,
I'm gonna add one
Go
thing,
ahead.
sorry. So something else, the cost of living takes into consideration, are you married, are you single, do you have kids, do you have multiple kids? So that is also a big factor that plays into cost of living. So when we're saying just utilities and housing, it also is the people in the household. Cost of labor, again, is just the supply and demand. Good? Yep.
so when we're building a competitive, market data-driven salary structure, what we have to do is we take that market data at the target of where, to be competitive to anchor your base pay. So we took the 60th percentile of all the market data that we collected from those benchmark jobs, and then we plot them on a diagram. And we do a regression analysis, and that regression analysis, what that's gonna do is give us our midpoints of the salary structure. So that's giving us that strong correlation between the market data for your local labor market and the midpoint. And then once we have those midpoints, we can then build the ranges around them, so those minimums and the maximums. And when we do that, we do it like an inverted triangle, and we do that for a reason. So the people at the lower grades that have a job that may only take you 1 year to become fully proficient in the role, it's more entry level, is gonna be more narrow. So it's gonna take you less time to get to that midpoint. Whereas a job where there's less room to grow and you may retire in that role is gonna have a wider range. So that's why we have it like an inverted triangle. So your midpoints are gonna represent someone who is fully competitive, or the competitive market rate for that particular job for someone who is fully proficient in the role, meaning they need no help in that job. They have the minimum requirements basically to move up to the next level.
Yeah, being fully proficient means you're most likely at midpoint. Now, there's other factors that play into that, like time and job and other things. But in general, being fully proficient means you should be at midpoint in a general term.
So once we have the salary structure, we then have to slot all the job titles. So this is a good example, and this is just an example of the process of slotting jobs that we priced and jobs that we did not price. So, go ahead.
Also too, these are not real salary numbers, so don't think that a marketing manager is only making 46,000, it's just an example.
So for this example, we have a column that has the national base at the 60th percentile, so that would be this client's target. The midpoint is gonna represent that market competitive rate, so that's what the salary structure was built off of. And then all of the jobs that we did price for this particular client, so the billing clerk, we did not price that job, the marketing clerk, so we did price that job, it came in at 28.4, and it was slotted into a grade 2 because it came closest to that midpoint. And then we look at the jobs that we don't price, so say a billing clerk, so they're both paraprofessional jobs that are entry level, we would slot them in the same grade because it makes sense especially with the other jobs that would be falling in line with the hierarchy of this client. So we look at the hierarchy, we look at the external factors of that market competitive rate and the internal equity as well. So we would work with HR, and if there was any kind of internal equity that we would need to make adjustments, we can do that as well.
So also on the slotting example, you'll see a billing clerk and marketing clerk. So one is obviously accounting, one's obviously marketing. The reason why they're slotted together is because they're similarly situated in autonomy, risk, and judgment. So not necessarily the responsibilities that they are performing in the job, but those kinds of factors that put them similarly situated puts them in the same grade. So it's not just, this is the marketing and goes in grade 2. You wanna make sure that you're comparing your people and their skill set equally.
So then, once every single job has these new ranges, then we have to do an analysis and see, okay, so now what do? How much is that gonna cost us? So we built a tool to help for budgeting, and what it's gonna show you is what the cost is, what's the cost for everyone who's under the minimum, what's the cost for everybody who's over the maximum, where should people be within the range, and how much will that cost to move them into that range. So that's kind of where we are right now, and working with the tool, and it's a very tedious exercise, and so it's still in process.
So after that, we want to create a best practice. So the best practice is a salary admin guidelines. What this is going to do is, when are you going to move your structure? What's considered a promotion? What's considered a demotion? Where should you be in the salary range? Are you at the minimum, midpoint, or maximum? What does that mean? So it kind of goes through all of the documents, actually everything in the kitchen sink, and then we pare it down. This also helps with pay transparency and the maintenance of the general program. So these are just the guidelines to help maintain the program so it doesn't fly off the rails down the road. That was our presentation. It was pretty fast and furious. Are there any questions or anything else that you would want us to kind of go over, any of the process? It's kind of a high level, but Chuck, anything you want to add?
Yeah, well, a couple of things, as you spoke, you should go back a couple of slides, if you don't mind. One more, right there.
Right.
Yeah, right there. So, there are a lot of CWP folks in here, today, and they have not seen some of this, so we've talked about it. But right now, what we're working with is HR and then the directors for the departments trying to do exactly what this is here, right? Slot them in the positions that they should fit in based on the criteria that you've given us. And so for the employees in the room that we have talked to a little bit about this, now maybe this makes a little more sense to you. We've been hesitant to show, where we are landing in grades and all of that kind of stuff, just because we're not finalized. None of that's finalized, but I think one of the elements that I found, I think it's very good, and it takes a lot of the subjectivity out of the process, is going to be the locking in someone to a spot based on tenure and time to proficiency. And one of the points that the folks at Lockton gave us was that if you try to slot somebody in utilizing a performance indicator, quite frankly, you find it's a little skewed at the beginning. So the easiest way to make this a very very open and transparent process for all employees is just slot them in based on the years of service and the tenure in their tenure to the company and the utility in this case. And then on top of that, you would take years of proficiency for that job. So that is part of what is happening now, is our staff, our senior staff, our directors are going through years of proficiency to try to determine, how long does it generally take to get an employee at whatever the position may be to a proficiency level. And that's, that may not be the final decision that we use on an annual basis to determine things, but it certainly is the starting point that gets everybody placed. All of these, when you drop all these marbles in, it lets them roll to the spot that they need to go without any influence from a management perspective. And I think that's a good way to do that. I've done that a lot of different ways over the years. It always seems when you take performance into that, it does skew where people start in their grade. And then also, our process has been for a long time. We put in place in 2003, I think, a merit-based compensation process. And everything that we've worked with Lockton and what we hope to work with them in the future on is going to be making sure that we do a good job of managing the merit-based, performance-based salary administration for all employees. And we'll have clear guidelines for all in that space, so that employees employees can use the entire range of the grade that they're in and not just get slotted into a spot and stay there with X number every year. You know, performers get more, and those who fall behind. And then it's our job as management to manage those employees to excel in their position. And that's, I think we've got some great directors at CWP that will continue doing that. But for the employees in the room who've not yet seen some of this, it's a little new to them, but hopefully that connects the dots on some of the conversations that we've had as a company in recent weeks as we've received this data.
And this will be reviewed, so our best practice is to have a recalibration, kind of go through this process again. Market changes, I mean, we see numbers crazy from 2021 to 2022 because of COVID. We're now realizing it. So when we go through that process, we'll take a look at where the salary structure is. It will move every year. And then we will kind of take those roles, compare them against market. If the salary structure needs to be adjusted because the market has moved, that's when we would do it. So this is not something that we slotted a role into a grade and it's staying there forever. You know, in 2 years, that value of that job might be much higher. It might go into a higher grade. So this is kind of a work in progress, but always a work in progress because you got to stay on top of it. And again, I will give the team, Chuck, your team went through this very methodically. We did go by department, and then we did it. And then we went by department, and then the department heads looked at it, and then we looked at it as a whole. So there was a lot of purview into the slotting process because that's kind of where it starts. So you want to make sure you get that right, or you're going to create a lot of inequities in the organization, and that is one thing that we don't want to happen. So we did spend a lot of time. There are still talks and adjustments as we're going through that costing model and what that looks like. So again, it's not finalized, but we're hoping to have that done within the next few weeks. But yes, so the slotting process was a fast and furious one because we did it all in 1 week, but it's a very important one.
Chuck, for the committee and the others that weren't part of this, when you're talking about the years to proficiency, and a good example that I can always recall is that a lineman goes through an apprenticeship for 4 years, and once they become a journeyman, they are supposed to be proficient. But we don't have those types of apprenticeships for a customer service representative or things like that. So that's kind of where this slotting and time to proficiency gets to be, you know, you have to use a little bit of judgment and a little bit of expertise from the Lockton group on saying, well, that position, the industry standard would be someone that's a meter reader should be proficient on 1 month into their job. So that's why that slotting really is kind of a difficult task to undertake.
It is, and the other thing, Alan, is a good point. The other the thing that we're realizing is that there are different levels of proficiency to your line, right? And every job is going to have that. And if you are you know, a year one lineman, we have a lineman, sure. We'll have a year one lineman or a year two lineman most often can't do what a year 15 lineman can do, right? So there's a process in which they're given more autonomy. Now that's before they hit the foreman level and they're actually running crews. But you do have this process in which you grow that position. And what we found is that you see where it says marketing associate 3, you see, and this is an example, collections associate 2, I think it says, whatever. You have different tiers, and that has been another element of something that we've had to incorporate to match staff to their abilities and proficiencies, right? So, for instance, in that case, you'll have a senior person that's been around for a while, can do most of everything independent that is not in management, and then you'll have a junior level. I say I'm making that up, maybe a level 1 or whatever, a junior level person that can move through X number of tasks independently, and then as time goes on, you add requirements to that job so they can prove proficiency and then move as the position grows. And that's been something that, has been really eye-opening for us, and it's been a great exercise for staff to go through. We've got a person we brought in to help us look at that on the electric and like electrician side. You know, Katie mentioned something just a few minutes ago that these jobs have just exploded in the cost of these jobs since COVID. We're seeing it in the utility industry, electricians and linemen, and a technical side of things is a scarce market. And those jobs since COVID, the cost of those have just exploded. And speaking to the guys at Springfield in their utility system, their electricians are rivaling a level above linemen in some cases, depending on job, because the market is just not there. They can't get these people. When they get them, they lose them to a lot of times to an industrial type manufacturer that utilizes that skill set in a manufacturing line and automation there. So it is quickly changing, and it's changed a lot in the time that we've looked at this, maybe from a couple of years ago to today. But certainly COVID has really expedited that process and that change in the workforce availability and the costing as well.
I'm just curious, so your salary scale is based off the 60th percentile?
That's what we'll aim
That's where
at.
the pacing.
Okay, I'm just curious, this is just so like, I know ours is based off 50th. So that, and I understand, so that just means that the base will be a little bit higher than if you looked at the 50th, correct? And so our salary scale has steps, but so you guys have you have your merit system, so it's based on your merit, like you start at the merit, the minimum, and then it depends on kind of what your merit is plus
So
the skills,
Yeah,
the level of skills.
So if you were to start with us and say, I'm gonna take one, and we're refining this based on some guidance that we're getting from Martin to make sure that we're managing that process better. But in today's environment, we could bring in, to make up a job here, a collections associate 1. They would generally start at whatever that number is, 26.8, right? So that would be the range in which you would start. They may have some experience that starts at 27 or 28, right? And then you would set performance indicators in front of them so that they can achieve over what you would expect to be, and tell me if I say this wrong, guys, but you would expect 2 or 3 or 4 year performance indicators that you say, okay, our proficiency for you will say that if we confirm that you are proficient in these standards, then at X point in time, we expect you to be at the 3,900.
Yeah,
whatever.
39,000.
So your performance moves you to that midpoint.
And then you're gonna adjust it each year for like a COLA.
Yeah, so then that's where the whole
That's right.
grade kind of gets moved, like the whole, what do you call it?
Minimum, the whole range.
Yeah, the
So
whole
it's
range,
minimum, midpoint,
your
maximum.
compensation structure page, so that it moves with that, like a COLA type environment.
And we pull that information from World at Work for your particular industry. So you'll be moving your structure just like other utility companies are moving their structure at that same pace.
So it's utility based, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct. Okay, and I remember in the beginning, you talked about World at Work. Can you kind of explain what that is? Because I know we use like a Midwest region.
Yeah, so it's a organization for compensation professionals, but also HR professionals in general. So they produce a survey that they do on an annual basis, that they ask organizations of all different kinds of, what are you budgeting for your merit increases? What are you budgeting for COLA increases? It's like COLA, merit, what are the other ones? Any kind of like promotional increases. And they also ask about, what are you gonna increase your structure to? So at when did they publish it? August, the end of August?
Yes, something like that.
So at the end of August, we get this information for all these different industries, and we can help you decide, based on budget, of course, but where other organizations like your own are gonna be updating their structure, what are they budgeting for merit increases? So you have an idea of what others are gonna be getting for merit increases as well, using that as an average. So, I mean, Roulette Work has all different kinds of resources in it, and it's widely used by HR professionals. So we have to pay we have a membership to it, and so we're able to use that data as well.
And also through World at Work is, not that you guys probably care about this, but the CCP is certified professional. So they have best standards. So you become a certified professional through them based on these 10 classes that take forever to do. But so they do have a certification process, kind of like you would see in a human resource. So they're like the industry standard.
Okay.
And even I think Mercer and Towers, if you read their methodologies through their survey sources, they utilize World at Work as well. So those big name survey sources that we use, they're all using World at Work and Economic Research Institute, ERI, that we use for cost of labor and cost of living.
And that's an ongoing service, and you'll help us manage that.
Yep.
for
However long.
Next year when you're
however
ready,
long.
yeah.
You'll tell us, okay, here's your number, this is what the index is that you need to move to, and that takes that process off of our plate to try to determine what we think that should be, right? It's gonna be tied to that, and it's just whatever that says, that's what we move.
So the ladies up there are much younger than you or I, Chuck. We can count on them until they retire, right?
Yeah, that's exactly.
She said as long as we want, yeah.
Exactly.
So the salary study's not complete yet,
We're working through, we're doing what you see on the screen right now.
so
That's
you
the-
don't know quite how it's gonna affect your budget yet.
we kind of have a general sense now where this thing's gonna sit, and, we'll talk about that a little bit in the
Okay.
budget here in a minute, but I think, you know, there are a few different ways to implement this, right? First, I think you mentioned cost to minimum earlier.
Yep, so you gotta get everyone to the minimum of the grade.
Right.
That's the first cost you have to absorb, or you should, I should say, if you're gonna do this. So at that point, it's the organization to say, are we gonna do that year one, because it's such a big cost, and hold off on into range, or are we gonna try and do cost to min and into range? And then the into range is basically saying, it's a formulaic way of saying, John Smith, you've been with the company 25 years, and you've been in your position for 7, you should be at X percent in the salary structure. And so that's what this is doing.
So that's what we're doing now, and
Yeah.
I think what the beginning indicators as we complete this process is that we'll move past the cost to minimum and cost to into range. And that's that can be a 1-year process for us. So that, and what we've seen in the data they've given us is if you prolong that implementation process, it just costs you more.
Yeah.
We're compounding that process. So all efforts for us to this point is going to be to target a 1-year implementation adjustment so that everybody's on board when that time comes.
The tool,
Into range.
Yep.
as you call it.
the tool that they mentioned earlier, I mean, you put numbers into this
Yeah.
tool.
Giant workbook.
And it tells you, well, if you go 1 year, this is the cost for this position, you know. I
Right,
mean, it's-
we had to look at that, you know, when we implemented our salary study, and the costs were so great that I think 95% of our employees wound up on step 1, on the lowest, because we couldn't afford, you know, more, but.
And that happens.
Yeah, most of our clients can't afford doing it over in 1 year, depending on what their cost is. And so that's why we have those options if needed, but we would always recommend to try to get it over in 1 year, because it will just compound each other, because people are getting more proficient in the role, the structure is moving on an annual basis, they could be
Merit.
10-year merit, so there's all these other cost factors that are coming in as well.
Yeah, in the past, I mean, governments haven't been competitive on wages, and now they have to be.
Right.
That's the problem, so it really does affect.
I don't know when you guys are doing another one again, and I'll.
We actually have in the budget just to do an update. She'll just kind of look at it and say, are you doing good? Is there something that needs to be adjusted? So it's not.
I could see us being, having that reoccurring, I think, especially as you see inflation cost and rapid adjustments right now in the markets. I think we're gonna see that as a recurring option for us as well, more rapidly.
I think how many years did she tell us we should do it? Like every 4 years?
Yeah, every 4 at least get an update.
We say 2 to 3,
Oh, you-
Yes, and I'll give you kind of an example why.
It was 3 to 4.
It was, yeah.
Before
After,
COVID.
but yeah, after COVID, we priced, and this was a clinical, so it has nothing to do with utilities, so keep that in mind. We priced this role, it was a medical assistant, back in 22, making 38,000. I priced that role 2 days ago, it's 50,000. It's went that high, that quickly. So when you're holding off that long, you could be hurting yourself because you're not catching the market as it's happening.
Even if you keep up with the cost of inflation and everything?
Well, you want to move your salary structure, which will keep you competitive. But if you have roles like IT right now, so if they blew up.
Don't listen, Mike.
We always pick on IT. But if those roles, if that job is very desired and you're just looking at the salary structure as a whole, then you might lose him for that kind of reason. So if you have roles that you're having trouble retaining, you're having trouble attracting, then maybe you should do something, take a look at it and figure out what it is. Maybe they're not in the right grade, get it repriced, those kinds of things. You don't have to do a complete full study, but you want to keep on top of the pay trends that are
So,
happening in
so
the market.
the demand for the job
Yep.
may shift faster
And it-
than
yes,
the cost of
And it
labor.
has definitely.
And that is
shifted.
what we are finding as well. I think everybody is seeing that.
And with some roles, and I don't think this necessarily pertains to utilities because you're kind of in-house, but what we saw like 22 and 23, you had people in New York who had big budgets, handpicking people from Carthage, saying, I know what they're paying you, I know what I would pay if I were in New York, let's meet in the middle. And now your cost of labor is going through the roof because you have external factors playing a part in that. So we saw a lot of that happening too. It's not slowing down really with the remote world that we're kind of in.
Mhm. I remember Brian making that point in one of the early meetings, that you have to compete because with the remote workforce,
Mhm.
they can easily make that change.
And that's, your accounting, your finance, your IT, there are a lot of jobs in today's environment that can be remote. So if you're not competitive in that marketplace, you're falling behind quickly.
Any questions? Terry, Dustin? No? Mr. Mayor, you have any questions? Okay. Well, ladies, thank you for coming and giving us this overview.
Yeah, absolutely.
And have a safe trip back to St. Louis.
Hopefully it won't rain.
I think we're good.
Do you mind if we take just a quick break so I can
Sure.
say a couple things to them and then get back to you?
Okay.
5 minutes.
Sure.
can we get that in our IT budget?
A clicker?
I don't know. Can we?
I say yes.
If you would just push that, down at the bottom on the right, you'll see a little, looks like a screen. Go on, and one more, there you go. Perfect. Before we do begin, Sam Kelly reminded me, in the audience, obviously, we have Brian Schmidt, our board president, Ron Moss, our vice president, and Aaron Collier, our secretary. We also have Kevin Emery, director of power services, Jason Schoen, director of water services, Kevin, and Jason Peterson, director of IT and broadband. So kind of give you a sense. And then the rest of them are all just here to, I'm sure, see what they saw in that last little presentation and hear where this is going now. So. Great to go. All right. Let me first make a couple comments, just to make sure that we're all on the same page, because I think what we'll be talking about today is in many ways different than what you have seen in other city departments. So a few points I want to talk about, and in your book, you see there is a couple of sheet on the inside left that talks a little bit about it, but there are the points I want to make, talk a little bit about the budget difference and what we are versus what the other departments of the city are. We're an enterprise fund, and that's kind of defined for you in that, and I'll read along just a little bit, but an enterprise fund is a type of fund used in governmental accounting to account for activities that provide goods or services to the public for a fee. That is meant to make the entity self-sustaining. It operates in a manner similar to private business enterprises with the intent that the cost, expenses including depreciation, of providing goods or services to the general public on a continuing basis be financed primarily through user charges. So basically that's rates, right? So its intent, the intent of the enterprise fund in the accounting world is to allow for that entity to operate like a business. And you manage within that scope of work, you manage your expenses and revenues like a business. And that is key. That's a key different in many ways from what you maybe see in other areas, because we will have from month to month extreme expense fluctuation or a massive revenue fluctuation in the budget. And we don't go back and make a budget appropriation for that every month. We just manage that throughout the year. And then as the year goes on, and as you can imagine in our world, as the year goes on, you'll see some fluctuation. So summertime, high usage, high expense, could be low usage and high expense, but that bottoms back out into the fall and you'll have some of a variance in another direction. So as you take the full year into account, we're not going through making budget variance and budget adjustments on a monthly basis, because it is an enterprise fund and it does have a significant difference from what you see in many other city departments. It is a full accrual accounting basis, and it is just a little different. And the objective for that is to manage those highs and lows in a like a business would. And I think that's just one of the points that I wanted to make sure that was clear to all as we go through this. That's kind of one of the reasons why it looks a lot different, and really in many ways that's the main reason it looks a lot different than what you're used to. And then secondly, I want to mention just a little bit, we talked about the accounting process, and I know you, and Mr. Taylor's not here, but I know you all have some experience in that environment from a business perspective. And you'll look at the accounting process for what we have looks different than the accounting process that you see in the city's other accounts, and that's there's a good reason for that as well, and that is FERC. It is FERC is I'm not going to say it's a four-letter word, but it certainly is a four-letter acronym, and it is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and they guide what we do in almost all facets of our energy business, and that is like any bureaucratic and regulatory agency, it can be cumbersome. But you see it in the banking industry, the healthcare industry. All industries see some type of major government oversight there, and that is ours. And so FERC accounting sets forth a process in a FERC chart of accounts that we follow. And I'll read just a brief bit of that to you so that maybe it gains a little bit of an understanding of why our accounting process also is different than what you would see elsewhere. And again, this is one of those things that after a couple of years, you're gonna recognize this and be fully aware, but just for some of you in the first year on the budget committee, it's important to set these parameters. The FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, has established regulatory accounting and financial reporting requirements for its jurisdictional entities in the electric, natural gas, oil pipeline industries. These requirements play a vital role in the Commission's strategy of setting just and reasonable cost of service rates. The foundation of the Commission's accounting program is the Uniform System of Accounts. That's what we are guided by, codifying the Commission's regulations. In addition, the Commission issues accounting rulings related to specific transactions and applications through orders and chief accountant guidance letters. This body of accounting regulations, orders, and guidance letters compromise the Commission's accounting and financial reporting requirements, which promote consistent, transparent, decision-useful accounting information for the Commissioner to take from the Commissioner and other stakeholders. These accounting and financial reporting requirements take into consideration Commissioner's rate-making policies, past Commission actions, industry trends, external factors like economic, environmental, and technological changes. So it basically sets forth, here's your chart account, here's how your accounting process should work, and follow these guidelines and you'll be fine. And we have, that also extends to our water and wastewater system as well. So when you see some of the account numbers on here, that may give you a little bit better understanding of where that's arrived from. It's not something we just make up, it's a guideline that we get from FERC. So those are two significant differences and major points to discuss. The other will be circle a little bit around the transfer and pilot. And just so we're all on the same page with what those are, is a pilot is a payment in lieu of tax. And basically it's a franchise fee to the city for having the utility, right? So if it was another utility in the city, that they would also pay, they would pay a franchise fee, and the city and the utility would come to an agreement on what that would be, and you have franchise fees with Suddenlink and other, or whoever that is now, you know, other entities, and that is ours. And that is a 3.5% adder to each bill of the customer, and that is allocated back to the city on a monthly basis. Additionally, you have the transfer of a 3.5%. That is a gross revenue of the utility. So that is after we pay all of our bills, we then take a 3.5% addition and carve out that and send it to the city as well on a monthly basis. Now that is based off of last year's audit, right? So that is a very standard process for us today. Prior to 2014, that really wasn't the case. It was more of a handshake agreement as to how that process worked. 2014 was a little bit of a monumental year for many things. And one was setting this transfer. And there are very few of us that were around then, but those that remember, there was a little bit of some tight budget times, right, for the city. And one of the opportunities to alleviate stress on the budget and improve the revenue position would be to seek additional funds from the utility, which would mean maybe raise whatever number the handshake was before 2014, raise that number up. As you can imagine, that was met with a little bit of little hesitation from the utility's perspective. You can get into trouble quickly. There was a little back and forth as to the best practice and the best method. The city retained an attorney, the utility retained an attorney. Those attorneys worked together to try to find resolution. It was also at that point in time, so we're trying to define, okay, what is a good number to settle on so that we can see an ongoing positive opportunity for the city to receive revenue from the utility, at the same time not being so much that it hurts the utility from a financial perspective. And we went back and forth with several different items, and at that point in time, some of the contention boiled over into a couple of other areas. One would be at the time, the utility managed the electrical inspections. That was our job. We did all the electrical inspections for the city. Quite frankly, what we did at that time was have the electrical inspections were passed based on the code book, current code book. And that can generate some tough situations with homeowners and business owners who are doing some electrical wiring, and quite often it would be, there would be some debate as to whether or not we need to use the current code book or a code book back a few years and just update it every 2 or 3. So there was a little bit of debate there of whether or not the city, well, actually the city at that time wanted the electrical inspection process to be taken in-house in the city and take that away from the utility so they could manage that appropriately through, just like they would all other code enforcement. And then the other element was a compensation management practice that we've had employed for quite some time. And there was some debate as to whether or not that was applicable if we were following the guidelines and if it was applicable for what we did. And then the transfer, right? So those 3 main points came out of that time frame, 2013-14 time frame. And we were a lot of back and forth, very good conversation about best options for the city as a whole moving forward and how we can support and do the right thing from both sides. We sat here in this room and decided that it would be best that the city take on the electrical inspections. It was determined by all parties in the room, attorneys and all, that the compensation management practice of the utility follows the ordinance, and it was understood, and we all shook hands saying that's fine too. Then we got to the debate about the transfer, and that was just a number. If you understand, before that it was, let's make it $1 million, let's make it $1.5 million, let's make it whatever it was, and it was a handshake agreement. Now, what we decided to do was based off of a lot of data that we did digging to find what the industry standard would be in a transfer. And one thing we all need to understand is that transfer you can call it a tax, you can call it whatever you want to call it, but it is a cost that the community will bear in the rates of the utility. And if you don't watch it, that can be too much. If that number is 10% or 15%, and there's nothing stopping that from happening, it gets to be very onerous on the utility and drives rates up significantly, while also generating great revenue for the city. So there's a balance there. And what we found at that point in time, that a 6 to 7% total transfer of funds, both the pilot and the transfer, that would be the number in the ballpark range we need to stick with. So in 2014, we passed an ordinance that said that we should then stick to a 3.5%. So it's a sliding opportunity, right? So no matter what happens, if our revenue grows, the city benefits from it, right? And we determined that that was the best fit, and that's the way it's been now for, 10 years, obviously. And I think it's a great practice. I think it was worked out well. All parties in this room got together and figured out that that's the best way to do it. And I think it was a good process, and we all learned a lot from it, and we all understood the potential negative impacts of making adjustments to that. Now, the thing we have to remember is that is set by ordinance. So at any point in time, that can change by ordinance. And the best practice is that cities take a look at including the cities that have a charter. The cities that have a charter, the best practice is to include that in the charter, so that can't be changed by a council because of the needs of financial need commitment that the city may have. I'm not saying we need to do that. I'm just saying that is the best practice, and that would take that ability to turn this into a 10 or 15%, which ultimately negatively impacts the customer of the utility, while benefiting the city quite well, which is understood. It takes that out of that temptation, I guess, for lack of a better term. So that's just, when we talk about transfer, that's how we got to where we are today. That's how that number's arrived at. It's based off last year's audit. So if our revenue climbs up next year, as we expect it to do, you're going to see an increase in that transfer of 3.5% to a new number that we send a check over to the city on. It's split up evenly over 12 months, and then that check is allocated to the city. So that is how that has been arrived, and that's how that's set in place with us in the city back in 2014. And I think it's a great process. Its only caveat would be, we need to keep an eye on how that transfer is managed as we move forward. And then the final point would be rates. The rate portion of our utility, or what we do, is very difficult. It's a long drawing. Alan mentioned that spreadsheet. If you change one number on the compensation, it's even more so. And from a financial perspective in the rate structure. And there's a significant amount of work that goes into setting the rates. And you have to manage not only consumption in a utility facet, you have fluctuations with the temperature that dramatically change whether or not you're gonna achieve your revenue requirements to meet the goal that you set for your rate structure, right? So it's not just producing widgets, you produce more, we sell more. It is, you gotta produce widgets, and you gotta produce them when the weather's hot and when the weather's cold, and that, so that it has a fluctuation that sometimes can be very difficult to pinpoint, but certainly this group does I think a fantastic job of setting a rate structure and getting it in place so that it is minimal impact to the customers as it can be, while allowing us the revenue to meet the demands for infrastructure replacement and investment in asset and employees and structures. So we do a good job there. Last year we had a significant rate increase, and Alan remembers last year was a big year. I think we had 2 years worth of driving inflation that finally caught up to us in the utility world. Prices have not come down for the products that we buy. A bucket truck that cost us $125,000 3 years ago cost us $280,000 today. That price, that time frame for that was about a 50-week delivery time. It is 4 years today. So, and that goes for transformers, elbows and conduit, to everything our inventory requires us to stock. We have the same amount of inventory that we had 5 years ago, and the cost of that inventory is probably 25 to 30% higher. So everything costs more, as you all know in your personal life. You go to the grocery store, you see increase in inflation everywhere, and we're no strangers to that. Our job is to over mitigate that process to the best we can and manage those expenses as we go through. When we talk about rates, I think it's very important. The key targets that we look at fund revenue requirements, one would be debt coverage ratio, making sure that we're able to pay our debt services. Minimum cash reserves, as witnessed a couple of weeks ago, you get hit by a tornado, you're spending a lot of money in a hurry. It takes no time to get to that point in the utility world. It doesn't take long to get there in everybody's world, but certainly the cost of products that we have sitting on poles and along tree lines is very, very expensive. So that minimum cash reserve has to be there for catastrophic events. It has to be there for power supply changes in power supply, which is an ever-changing industry for us. Capital costs that are needed, and then we have a collateral requirement in the regional transmission operation that we have to have as well. So minimum cash reserves are very, very important to a utility, as it is in all other businesses. And then targeting operating income so that revenues, target operating revenue or income, I'm sorry, is just what we need to be able to do the work that we need to do, and that's a key element to any rate structure. So as we talk about where our rates are going, understand that those are 3 tiers of a very important process behind the scenes that we work on throughout the year. We did have Toth and Associates come in this year to perform an additional rate analysis for us, and it's bleak. It doesn't look good. The prices are not coming down. The costs are continuing to skyrocket, and it sits on the shoulders of the folks in this room to manage that, and they do a great job. And we have great leadership with our utility board. It's the benefit of having some business folks like Sid Teal now and Tom Garrison who understand what it is to run a business. They see it as maybe have more commas than what they deal with on a regular basis, but certainly it's the same principle. So they understand how to manage those and to make sure that we're doing the right thing from a financial perspective. So those are the 3 main points I want us to talk about, think through as we go through this budget process, so that you better understand goals and reasons why our numbers sit where they do at times. Last year, I left this meeting when Alan was sharing it last year and said that, I think last year's rate was 8 to 9%, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere in that range. And I said, don't be surprised if it's not again, in 2024, 25. We'll get to that in a minute, but that was my expectation moving into it. So with that said, if you don't mind, if you click on that first one, please, thank you. So office and joint, every department has, their costs associated to it. Office and joint has a couple of areas that get, that all the costs get allocated to the different departments, okay? So one more slide, please, thank you. So in this slide, you'll see, supervision costs and accounting. So the 91.9 accounts basically are the total accounts that's the service, to the other departments of the utility, and customer interaction is the way to say that, right? You will see, actual 22-23 to budget FY 23-24, you'll see an increase in all of these. And what we did at that point in time was we made an adjustment to our, how we account for the cost of an employee. And instead of having some accounts that you'll see here in just a minute, they get allocated to the different departments. We took all cost of that employee, benefits and everything. That hourly cost of that employee now is dedicated directly to the department and the specific job they're working. So you'll see an adjustment here as it goes upward. That doesn't mean there's an increase in wages or anything like that. What that means is that there is the total cost of that employee, where it was a $10 an hour employee before, for example, our total benefits for that employee is actually $15 an hour. That total $15 sits in the account now that it is attributed to, versus an account that gets split up through an allocation, okay? So that's the reason why you see that number making that big jump in FY from 22-23 to 23-24. As you look down there, our budget number, we budgeted to come in at $920,000. Our projected comes in at $813,000, and our budget next year will be $1,132,200. That increase is for a few different things. Primarily, we have been evaluating for the last year. We put it in the budget last year and it didn't happen, as an IVR system, and that would be a system that would allow customers, as they call in to report an outage, to get some automated opportunities to click a button and quickly get that outage information logged, versus having to talk to one of our folks and write something down. I'm not a huge fan of this, so I've put pretty stringent requirements on the employees as they go through the evaluation process. This has to be user-friendly and intuitive. Most people who make a phone call want to talk to somebody. They don't want to hear a robot. I don't like it, right? Now, I'm sure there's some millennials in this crowd that would prefer to use an app or push a button and be done with it. I'm not that guy. So I want to make, it was important in a customer service satisfaction survey that we did, that customer interaction face-to-face or on the phone was very important. So we're making sure that we're doing the right thing, and we had it in the budget last year, but we did not spend it, and we're going back again this year. We increased the cost a little bit to that so that we can find a product that works the way we need it to work, so that we maintain good quality customer service at all times. So the $1.1 million, if you look down below that, you see how that is allocated to the department. So that the customer service costs now get 419 allocated to electric, 305 allocated to water, 294 to wastewater, and 113 to the communications department. You'll see these numbers repeated throughout this budget process, but now you understand kind of how we arrive at that and where they're coming from. So if you turn the page, please click. You'll see the office and joint general administrative expense. So this one, again, is the same thing, just a lot more accounts that we have. Now, you see in the center section, a bunch of blanks, right? A bunch of lines and empty space. In that is those are the fringe, those are the benefit section of our accounting process that has been now allocated per hour per employee. So like in my example again, this would be for that $10 an hour employee that actually costs us $15 an hour to have. This is the $5 delta in between, right? All that you see there made up is that differential. These are not the wages, right? These are just the all-in costs for that employee. So when you see increases going, don't be alarmed that there's some increase if you're unaware of. That is our all-in cost for that employee. As you go down the list, there is a couple of things just to highlight. Our economic development that you see at 9293030. We budgeted $2,089,000. We came back with a projected number to finish this fiscal year of $2,004,000. We'll come back next year with $683,000. That money was the land purchase for the economic CEDC. So that's why that number has a one-time big hit. We budgeted for that in last year and spent that money this year. And then that number comes back down. And then in economic development, public relations, that's everything we do outwardly facing to the customer. And that is a substantial effort. That is going to be any efforts that we do, obviously internal, where we have staff. There's some of them are sitting in this room that have an outwardly facing effort to communicate and advocate on customer behalf or services on for our behalf, or economic development efforts in the community, like Stephanie works on a regular basis with Jeff Meredith. That is accounted for in that, along with the commitment that we have made to the CEDC, along with the commitment to the Chamber of Commerce. So those will be the things that you see in that account. Down at the bottom at the total, you see we have a budget amount of 4.7 million. We came back in our projected number of 4.2 to finish the year, this fiscal year. Next year will be a $3.8 million budget number. And then below that, in the electric department, water, wastewater, communications department, you see the allocation for each one of those departments. So electric takes the lion's share of the work there, obviously. Any questions about how that works? Once you kind of have that figured out, the rest of this becomes pretty intuitive, I believe. It's just want to make sure that that's understood. If you don't mind changing that, please. Thank you. Now, all those blank accounts that we were looking at, and it really is kind of hard to see on the screen, apologize. All those accounts that you see were now void. We still need to track, right? We need to understand where we are with retirement costs, health insurance costs, liability insurance, cyber insurance, and so forth. So this is our tracking of those as they've now been taken out of that portion of the budget allocated to the department and the individual. This is what our costs are. So our CWP retirement goes from 15.6 to 16.4. Health insurance, an 8% expected increase. That does not come into play until November. And then property and casualty, and so forth down the line. So that gives you a snapshot of where those numbers are going for us. And we track that to make sure that we're in line. Next slide. In slide 4 in your book, you have now office joint capital expenditures. So this will be our capital outlay for fiscal year 24-25. You can see our budget amount of $380,000, projected 503, and then now coming in next year with 1.1, we have significant improvements that we need to make. One of those would be an addition to our truck barn extension behind the building. We need 5 additional bays in that facility, as we have added the fiber optic group. We have now 3 crews of fiber optic technicians, plus 2 trailers, another one on the way, plus all additional equipment. We continue to need to have those items stored to extend their life, and that's what that cost is. There are a few others on there, but that's the major driver to that number. And you can see at the bottom how that gets allocated to the various departments as well. So electric gets 455, water gets 312, wastewater 296, and communications 113. If you don't mind, flipping one more page, there you'll see this is one of the items, proposed gravel pad up on the hill behind where we're doing some of the work. Next slide, please. This is the pavement resurfacing project that we need at the warehouse and behind the warehouse power plant and water treatment plant. That is an ongoing, regular maintenance issue that capital issue that we need to make sure is addressed. Next slide, please. This would be the additional bays needed at the behind our property there on Centennial. So we'll add those 5 bays just to the east of the existing facility. Next Next slide, please. And then this area is the original asphalt from when that hospital was there. We've made some modifications to it, obviously, so that we have a drive-through in that space now. And what we're finding is that asphalt does not have a very good base, and that's getting fractured and broken up pretty severely. So for us, that's a path for our trucks. So trucks come in off of either Hazel or Centennial and run straight through there, and as that blue area begins to change to gray on the northern end of that, that is new from there north, and from everything south, our trucks are heavy, and that's just the way it is, and those are causing more and more damage to that, and quite frankly, getting in and out of that property is not the easiest thing to do, and coming in on the backside of the property is a significant slope. So that is the entrance to the property, and then they exit there on Wood Street behind us. So a lot of traffic runs through that point, and that asphalt has seen better days, and it is time to replace it. We will be replacing that with concrete so that we don't have to deal with this again in the future. And that is the next slide, please. And that completes that office and joint. So now those accounts, you'll see that money now allocated to the various departments as we move forward. Next slide, please. Thank you. So communications is up next, and man, that is really, really clear, isn't it? That is awesome. I apologize for that. Fiber, this is our communications department, this is our income statement for the communication revenue, or the communication department. First up would be our revenue. We had budgeted in 23-24 a $1.9 million revenue hit, or revenue gain for us. We came in at just 1.97, very, very good budgeting number for us. We budget next year to come in at $2.4 million in fiber revenue. That is our fiber to the home plant, and as it grows, we continue to hope that revenue number continues to grow as it should. Wireless revenue, this is where we're going to decrease, because we're going to be now continuing to take customers from the wireless side, and as they want to transition to fiber bandwidth, that number will decrease as the years go on. So in your budget, their total operating revenue, you see a 2.2 budget number coming in at 2.3, just a little over for projected, and then coming in next year with a revenue number of 2.7. Down below that, you have your customer service expense, general administrative expense that we just talked about, for a total operating expense there of 1.9 and 23, which is the center column. 23, 24, 1.7, and then next year at $2 million. So that leaves us with a net operating revenue number of $624,000 for projected next year. One thing that we generally do on the fiber side, this will be a theme, and as you see some red numbers later in the budget, we are very conservative on the fiber growth side. We're hitting milestones where we need to, but we are trying to be very, very conservative in that. Tends to make it look scary, but quite frankly, we are building a brand new fiber to the home system that's been built now. We've got 3 years under our belt, but you still have a tremendous amount of capital that has to be outlaid to get the individual customers hooked up, and to finish a few spots that have not yet. We got 3 little pockets or more so in town, and so there's a capital intensive process that continues to go on. So the way to address that would be no different than they looked at this utility when they were building the electrical water systems. Let's hook up more customers, right? The more revenue we can generate, the better off we are. You're going to have that capital cost, but keep adding customers to your service. So if you see the third line from the bottom, we'll look at the budget number. The net income before the transfer, we talked about earlier, $488,000. We transfer to the city $66,000 that is generated revenue off of the communication department. Again, as that number grows, that number grows for the city as well. So that's a positive, right? Communication department net income it ends up the year at $421,000, well, almost $422,000. One thing to remember is net income does not include principal payment of debt or capital expenditures. Principal payments and capital expenditures do not flow through this income statement. So as you see here in a minute, that's going to change as you know how income statements work. Next slide, please. Thank you. The communication department capital expenditures, you see there what it cost us to build the system. we have financing for what we've done for the last 3 years, and everything from this point forward is kind of on our own, and based on growth. You can see fiber equipment we have budgeted next year. You know, we budgeted in 23-24 416, coming back in 23-24 285 projected. So, you know, that's a positive in many ways. Some of that is because we couldn't get to some work that we wanted. Next year, we will budget $224,000 in capital for the fiber equipment. Fiber line, this year, budgeted goes from 1.3 million, projected to finish the year at 1.1, almost 1.2, coming back next year and budget at 1.3. And then total capital expenditures for the fiber next year, $1.6 million. And you have listed there just a little bit of what those capital items are, in items 1 through 4 below. This one is one of the small ones as we get to the electric, water, and wastewater. Those have a significant amount of capital projects and outlay as we move forward. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is just a quick little interface to show you where we were quarter 4 of 21 with our fiber deployment. And you can see on the screen, there's a different color for every segment and section that we got up and running. And so that is homes passed, 3,199. Homes passed does not mean it's ready to hook up at your house. I'm sorry, it is ready to hook up at your house. It is not from the alley or front to the house. That service connection has not yet been done, and that's the additional capital that we continue to spend moving forward. It is pretty intensive, but we've passed 3,199 homes in quarter 4 of 21. We added the 1,098 homes passed. Now all of those are available, have the fiber out in the street or in the alley ready for them if they choose to accept that. And that's kind of a little bit of a map showing where they are. Next slide, please. That's the quarter 4 of 22. See, we've added another 399 homes at that point. Next slide, please. Now we took a big jump in 23 to get us to 6,264 homes passed. You can see most of the city by quarter 4 of 23 was covered. And unfortunately, we chose, we kind of run out of colors here, so you're going to get brown and some of that looks like a clean cover, but it certainly is. Next slide, please. And that is quarter 4, 7,362 homes passed. So in this point, that is the money that was borrowed, $7 million, yeah, $7 million project, money that we borrowed to build the fiber to the home system, and now we have 7,362 homes passed. There are a couple of pockets that will be present on this slide, but that kind of gives you an idea of where those areas were, the areas of growth. One thing to remember is that, you know, before we decided to move forward with this project, we were building this on our own, a little bit at a time, and then demand hit and said, it's time for you to just go all in. Let's get the financing put in place so that you can borrow enough money to pass enough homes. You know, we have a good product, as most of you know, and it's just a matter of it was time for us to go ahead and take the leap and cover all the homes on our service. And that is obviously in the service territory. You can see it out in the country. Those are areas that we currently serve in electric. That was the primary focus of the build out for the fiber, was to cover the same area for the as the electric has with the fiber optic. So pretty good area of the community covered. And most often when we have new construction in the subdivision, even out towards Precious Moments, that area is all covered as well. And those are great new additions to our customer base. Next slide, please. So this is what the build out looks today. 7,511 customers passed. We have 278 miles of fiber now installed. 32% of the customers passed are served with service. That means we have 32% of the customers. You can see a few pockets there that we do not yet have service, and those are, it's things like the ground is solid rock and we can't underbore through it. They're the last areas. You know, we were able to get more bang for our buck in those other areas taken care of first. These are areas that have significant hurdles in construction, but there are fewer today than when we even did this. We've made some headway in a couple of areas, so we'll find those, get those taken care of. But the The light green area is the area which we cover. The dark green is the miles of fiber that was hung. That is a lot of work done in 3 years by our folks and by the contractors in town, building basically a system from scratch. It's been a great project, managed quite well by Jason Peterson and his staff. Next slide, please. So this page gives you an indication of where we need to end with forecasted communication revenue. And from this is a 5-year financial projection. So your expected growth rate for this one, we need to meet about a 5.36% increase in growth rate to meet the objectives to where we lose $205,000. 2.7 to meet the objective of net cash reserves of -1, just under 170, and then 1.4, 2.5. Now again, we are being very conservative in this. We generally beat those estimates in most cases, but we think that's a very responsible view of how this thing gets built. It is not, we're not inflating the numbers to make it look better than it really is. It takes a lot of work to pass these homes. It takes a lot of work to get these homes hooked up. And the losses that you see there and the forecasted communication, we feel like we're gonna still beat those or come quite close to covering for those. Again, the transfer of the city is just north of that. Obviously, if that wasn't there, that would help, but it is, and that's fine. We just, we have to manage that appropriately as we move forward. And that is based on a 30% market take rate, right? So we're gonna say we get 5.3%, 2.7, 1.4, 2.15. That gets us covered the entire city with a 30% take rate. Quite frankly, I feel like that number is gonna be higher, closer to 40%. Most of the areas in which we cover and have had service for quite a while, we're very pleased with it, and it spreads quite quickly to the neighbors' homes. Our issue today is just manpower, right? We have 3 crews, we have about 8 employees in that department, and to go through, plow, put in something from the street or the alley to the house is time intensive. And that's, you know, when we advertise for it, we get inundated with a lot of requests, and we address those requests, and then we don't advertise for a little bit. We kind of let that growth, we cover that growth desire, and then we advertise again and just grow a little bit at that pace. And that model works quite well. Any questions about communications?
You also had some issues with getting supplies, right? To
Oh,
go to home.
yeah,
I mean, that's
it's-
constantly
We
ongoing.
decided to do this, and then COVID hit. And so, yeah, you know, year 1 of our project, you had no supply anywhere in the country, nothing was available, you couldn't get it. And additionally, one of the other drawbacks is we approved the financing for this in December of 20, is that right? December 20, is that right? Okay. The financing. Yeah. And then in March of 21, the federal government came in and said, hey, anybody's wanting to do this, we'll give you a bunch of money, but if you chose to do this prior than March of 21, you do not get any federal funding. And I'm telling you, buckets of money fall from the sky. So kudos to us for taking the initiative to move forward and get a good quality service to the customers. And unfortunately, the federal government did not cooperate in their funding gift from God to get to us. But it is what it is. But yes, early on, supply chain disruption was brutal to this department. They did the best they could to make that happen. And after 3 years, it got back on track, and they made some great progress.
Any questions, Dustin, Terry?
Pardon?
Any questions?
Okay, so we'll go on to wastewater next, please. One more. Thank you. In wastewater, you see the income statement. Again, this is not going to have your principal payments of debt or capital expenditures in this. It's just simply an income statement. Our revenue numbers are listed first. In wastewater revenue, we budgeted $2,079,000, and Jason did a great job of overcoming, of reaching above that revenue and coming in at $2,088,000. So $9,000 increase in revenue. Budget for commercial revenue, 764, came in at 782, again beating that revenue number. Industrial revenue of 840, coming in at 901. We genuinely believe that those adjustments in revenue are because of the rate adjustments we made last year, because we are not not seeing we're not seeing growth in any of our areas of significance. They continue to be flat in almost all areas of our service delivery. There are a lot of reasons for it, but it is what it is there. When you get to operating expense, again, you'll see customer service expense and administrative that are taken from the pages prior. We budgeted almost 1.67 in 23-24, came back with 1.6, so we managed to save a little there. Pretreatment expense is roughly in line, but we saved some money there. We're coming back with 125 next year. I'll skip down to your net operating revenue of budgeted 42,000. We came in ahead of that at 335. Next year, we're coming back with 329,000. You get to the other revenue, and you have a $2 million in budget year 23-24. We have a $2 million number in there that was not spent in projected 23-24, but we are bringing it back in budget year 24-25. And that $2 million is money that Cody Smith earmarked for the city of Carthage to address the wastewater needs. And this has been just a great blessing. We unfortunately weren't able to get the contract in place to spend the money in our projected year this year, but we have already gotten the contract put in place. And so through the ARPA funding and grant money, Cody earmarked $2 million for CWP to utilize this in helping to mitigate I&I issues in our with our wastewater system. We expected that bid to come in and cover about 10 miles worth of work. We generally get 2 to 3 miles a year on that project. We thought this $2 million would cover about 10 miles worth of work. The bid came in quite positive and allows us to get a little over 12 miles now. So we're actually going to be well ahead, if I said that properly, Jason. So we're going to be in a position to really make a giant leap forward with I&I mitigation due to the relining projects that we have on schedule. So that's a big, if you see Cody, thank him. He did a great job of getting that allocated to us. You know, it pays to have the budgetary here on town at the state level, and we're certainly pleased to be able to do that. The wastewater department net income, you can see down at the bottom, is a little misleading because of that $2 million revenue, other income number in the grant. So if you remove the roughly $2 million, you're going to sit there with about 212,000 net income position prior to debt service. Next slide, please. So this is our capital expenditures. Again, this is where that $2 million sits. The rest of this are pretty standard process for us. We don't have anything outside of the norm. We are working to improve the SCADA system, and we've chosen Microcom to be that host for us in that space. We have had a SCADA system built internal to CWP, and we would have had this work done probably this year, but we lost the employee to Kansas City, and the process to make that conversion happen kind of got delayed because we are dependent on that technician to really make that happen. We have actually a new technician with us now who's going to do a great job, and he's already done a great job evaluating the Microcom product, and we're ready to move forward with that. So that will actually hit this year's budget, and it was not something we were able to get done last year. So you can see the budget cut number and our capital numbers coming in next year at $2.9 million. Again, $2 million of that is the work that we're going to get on I&I mitigation for the lining project. Jason, when is that going to start?
Within the next 60 days.
All right, so we're ready to go on that one. Next slide, please. So on this slide, you'll see our existing rates on the left-hand side. Customer charge on a 5/8 meter of $20.50 today, going to $21.50 next year, and then down the line on our wastewater. We are working to compress the rate classifications on this to mirror more of the water side. It's a little bit confusing when you look at both of them, but you will see a comparison comparison on when we get to the water side of what I'm talking about, but there are several different meter sizes. And obviously, as everybody knows, you don't meter wastewater. Nobody wants to read that meter, so we base the billing off of the water consumption. So that, all gallons residential goes from 0.00382 a gallon to 0.00439 a gallon. And then non-residential is listed below that as well. Next slide, please. This is the rate sheet. We have in the back of the book is the full rate book. This one we have listed in the big red box in the middle of it, and that is to indicate we are moving the our extra strength charge from a permit application that we work with our industrial customers. We're moving it from the permit to the rate structure, and that is just a best practice move recommended to us by our engineers. That way that is in front and they can see that all the time. I mean, we have a great relationship. Stephanie Howard and Jason Shope do a great job working with our industrial class customer. This recommendation is just basically moving it from a permit number to our rate structure is why you see something different. So when you go back to the rate book as that gets approved, that just kind of just highlights that. But it's just a best practice move, and it shows you the cost per 1,000 gallons of each one of those, the BOD, the TSS, and the old fall. Okay. We have on there nitrogen, phosphorus reserve, because those are things that are going to be coming our way. Just so you know how that works, that is a permit that we get from DNR. So we have to, DNR allows us to be permitted to discharge into Spring River. So we treat all the wastewater in the city. And for our industrial customers, we permit them to work within our permit. So they have to meet the thresholds that we set for them so that we do not have any disruption to normal operation at our wastewater plant that would ultimately disrupt what is permitted to be delivered to Spring River. So they kind of give that guidance, and then we manage that internal in our system. And that's what that is. Next page, please. This sheet is the neighboring utility comparison sheet. You'll see that Carthage existing to Carthage proposed across there. We have these classifications in gallons usage, almost 3,000 gallons, 5,200 gallons, 11,200 gallons roughly. And then the bottom line is the commercial. This, generally speaking, you want to be, you need to be where you need to be on this. I'm sure many have heard me say this before, and I'll repeat it now to the new members. If you can sit at the bottom of this list because you are not spending the money necessary to reinvest in your system, and I'm not saying that's what happens with anybody at the bottom of this, but if you're not generating the revenue needed to address the mitigation of your aging infrastructure, then you can sit at the bottom of this for a long time. It's gonna catch up with somebody, and you're gonna have a system that is in bad shape. And instead of addressing that on an annual basis, you'll be addressing that in a multi-million-dollar upgrade to your entire wastewater system. So our objective is to be fair within the rate structure. We look at this as a comparison to see where it sits, making sure we are competitive. Most often, you'll see the others on this list tick up as the years go on, and align in some way, shape, or form with some of the others. But it doesn't, just because we're at the bottom or the top of the list, doesn't necessarily mean you're doing good or bad. So just keep that in mind. You've got to take care of your infrastructure. But that gives you a reference. Next slide, please. As we talked about a minute ago, in the ARPA funding, this in the yellow, this is our wastewater system, and green. And in the yellow are areas we have identified to come in with the relining projects to make sure that we do not have I&I in the system, and that what we are treating at the plant is actually wastewater and not rainwater and other elements of I&I. So that kind of gives you an overview of what we will be working on this next year. That's a lot. As I mentioned earlier, we're going from about $2 or $3 million a year to, or I'm sorry, 2 or 3 miles a year to 12. So there'll be a lot of work. Let's pray that we will not be the pariah that anybody else would be in tearing up streets. This, generally speaking, we have some great contractors that come in and help manage traffic flow quite well. And the lining process does allow for that, whereas as a normal construction, tearing up streets does not. So this is not that. This is a lining project that goes from manhole to manhole. Okay, next slide, please. Grid auger down at the wastewater plant, we're gonna be replacing, it's a smaller number, but I just thought it'd be interesting to see. I'm not sure everybody here wants to know what a grid auger does, but it is at the wastewater plant. Most generally speaking, it's something you just hold your nose and take a look at and go on. So that concludes the capital part. So next page, please. And then this is our projected forecast for wastewater. Now here, this is what's a little bit different than what you saw with communication. Is there at the top of the page, you can see using a 7% inflation rate on expense. So what we're expecting is to see 7% year over year on inflation. That's just the best guess. We talked to experts, that's what they're expecting or planning for. TOF recommended that along with our folks, just as we see where procurement has put us. So a 7% year over year inflation. Targeted revenue requirement will be in years 25, 26 through the right hand side of the page, 7%, 7%, 6, and 4. Now there are two ways you get to the culmination of a revenue requirement. One would be increased load, increased consumption on your system, or a rate adjustment. We're not saying you're going to see a 7% rate adjustment next year. It could come in the form of an increased consumption of use of our wastewater. And if that is the case, that lessens the pressure on rates. That's going to be a theme we'll talk about in water, wastewater, and electric. So if consumption climbs, rates stabilize. If consumption is flat or declining, rates go up, because that's the only way you can cover your cost of inflation. So just be mindful of that as we go through. You can see at the bottom of the page, net cash to reserves. We have a pretty good stream of transfer to the city from 132,000 to 171 based on our projections for revenue. That far column of 446, it's really kind of hard to pinpoint all the areas in which you're going to be identifying wastewater work that will be capital intensive. So that number's probably not going to sit at 446. It's 5 years out. So we've left it in there just more as a placeholder so you can kind of see where we're headed. That concludes the wastewater portion of the budget. Any questions? All right. Thank you very much. If you don't mind, go back one slide, please. There is the first time Carthage has ever received this award, which is the Missouri Rural Water System of the Year. We've talked about that. Some of you I have had that conversation with before, but that is an association as a branch in the state of Missouri based off the American Rural Water Association that our group belongs to. And you have to be identified by a peer in your state. There are roughly 2,700 peers in the state, water systems, rural water systems. You have to be identified as a peer, then the review team comes in and assesses your financial standing, your operational standing, your governance position, and then makes a recommendation to a committee to move forward. Carthage won this for the first time, I think, in the history of Carthage, and we're very, very proud of that award and the good work that Jason showed and his team do to represent the city of Carthage and the citizens by the water system. So that's just a little picture there. Thank you. Next slide, please. All right, here we have the income statement for the water department. Again, this is does not include capital expenditures. It is an income statement. You see budget number in revenues, the top section, residential, commercial, and industrial, very flat. And in fact, going down in revenue from $2 million on residential to just under that, very flat. Commercial down a bit, and industrial just very flat. And we're projecting that to kind of rebound a little bit next year. To be quite honest with you, there's really not a lot of indicators of this. It's more hopeful that we do. We need our major industrial customers to use more and more water. That really does help us significantly, and all customers stabilize rates. In the operating expense, you see production and distribution costs. We did what we could to mitigate some of those increases in costs, and save a little bit. Next year in the budget, we come back at 1.2 and 1.1 respectively. Then you have your customer service expenses and general administrative expenses, as outlined earlier in the presentation. Then you slide all the way down to really not a lot below that until you get to the net income before transfer of 152,000 budgeted coming in, projected at 300,000. Again, that is a rate adjustment upwards, so it's not because of consumption. Transfer to the city of 123 respectively, and then the net income to the department of 28,176 with a loss of 11,000 next year with $131,000 transfer to the city. So it's, you know, certainly not the end of the world to be able to mitigate some things, but just to give you an idea of what the income statement is, where it's headed. Next slide, please. These are our capital expenditures for the water department, and as you can see, they're pretty standard work for us. I would take a look at line item 6. 800,000, that is account number 234300, distribution, transmission and distribution main system. $800,000 budgeted last year, came in with 127. And a good portion of that was because we had budgeted to have a company come in and do a lot of work for us, and our folks actually took a lot of that on themselves and saved a significant amount of money by doing it in-house. It's not something we can always do. It's really dependent upon time and availability. Again, that's another positive and resources that we're able to utilize in a positive way. But we did come back with another 800,000 as we have identified significant work moving forward. So remember, every bit of our rate structure has to go back. We have to have a portion of it to be reinvested in infrastructure, or we're going to find ourselves in a situation where we have a dated and outdated infrastructure system. So a significant amount of money for us every year spent in some level of our distribution system, replacing 100-year-old main water mains. Again, item 11, you'll see a microcom, which is the SCADA system. We'll be implementing that this year. We had expected to do a little bit last year and did not. The loss of an employee. Overall, our budget number of $1.4 million budgeted, $409,000 spent, we come back with 1.6 next year. And that is that there are many factors that can drive where you find yourself in your capital expenditure. Much of that can be what is in need of repair immediate versus what can hold off for a year or two. Next slide, please. This will be your rate structure. On the left-hand side of the page, you'll see residential service. You can see now we have meters up to 2-inch meter, then you have a customer charge for a 3 to 6 inch, and then customer charge for a 10-inch meter. So it's more compressed and more concise relative to the wastewater. The up to 2-inch meter will go from $15.60 a month residential charge to $16.60, so a $1 customer charge for that. Your gallon cost is going from 0.00404 cents a gallon to 0.00435 cents per gallon for our residential customers, and you can see the non-residential below that, which will compromise most all businesses, and those, generally speaking, are the meters much larger than the 2-inch. Change the page. Oh, what did that say? I can't read it. Oh, yeah, thank you. You got it. This sheet gives you your rate comparison to neighboring utilities again. In this, you can find where Carthage sits relative to our neighboring communities. We're getting a lot of work done for the money that we're spending, or the money we're generating in revenue. This is one of those that it's not necessarily great to be at the bottom or necessarily bad to be at the top. Where we're sitting in there and relative to our rate structure, I think we're very competitive. When we look at being an attractive location for industrial businesses as we move forward. So pleased at where we're at. But again, the key is to replace infrastructure and make sure that your system has proper integrity. Turn the page, please. And this kind of gives you an idea. This is a big project for us this year on Central. You can see right there at King Cache. in Baker, just a little bit west of that, all the way to, a little, somebody's got a car wash right there. We're going to the, just to the east of that. So that is the area that will, a major construction will happen for us this year in paint replacement. And if we turn the page, you'll see again our forecasted water. This is the page in which we again talk about our targeted revenue requirement using a 7% inflation rate. This one, we don't get to see any declining numbers in years 4 and 5. This is pretty much holding steady at 7%. If we don't see increase in consumption, then we're gonna have that 7% increase year over year. Now, I think, hopefully we do see that, and that mitigates the need for adjustments in rates, but just at a glance, this is where that puts us. And then you can see your net cash yield reserve, and from reserve down at the bottom, going from a transfer to the city of 146 to about 178,000 at the bottom. Again, we'll have some capital projects later out in the years that get identified now that will start to fall in years 4 and 5. Any questions about the water system? We're getting there, guys. Next slide, please. Electric. Yeah, one more, please. Thank you. Electric system income statement, again, no principal payment or debt. In this, you'll see revenue numbers of residential, commercial, and industrial, very flat in all categories. That is, that's a difficult one. Of course, we've got to see consumption continue to climb. That flat element is because of the rate adjustment that we made last year. If we hadn't done that, we would be in a different position for sure. Operating expense in the production, 1.08 million, and we'll come in just underneath that, coming back next year at 1.2. Then our big number, purchase power, we budgeted to have a $20 million expense, just a little over $20 million. It came in just a little under $20 million. So that was a real benefit to the system, and that can happen for many different reasons. Some of which is good management by the folks at the power plant, and Kevin and his team, and some of that can be luck at market prices that we get to buy into. So a combination is what we would attribute that to for sure. If you slide down, your net operating revenue of 3.8 million and budget 23-24, projected 5 million, coming in next year at 4.9. And if you slide all the way down to the bottom, our transfer to the city of $1 million in budget year 23-24, we're projected just over that, almost $1.1 million next year from electric alone. And then our numbers budgeted on the net income on the electric of 2.4 with 4.5 million, projected to wrap up the year with 2.6 coming back next year in our income statement. We have some unique stuff that may very well happen for us on the electric side next year. We'll kind of get to that here in another couple of slides. But first, we'll go ahead and look at our electric department purchase power, which is the next slide, please. Thank you. You really can't see that at all. That's all. Apologize for that. I want to make sure that's better. So this is our purchase power expense. This is the cost of energy into the system. We budgeted 8.6 million, came in at 8.7 million in energy alone, and then your demand cost of 10.8 million came in at 10.2. So we did see a benefit in that this year. We hope to come back with that again next year, as well as budgeting a total of $19.8 million for our budget year 24-25. That's based on 294,168,320 kilowatt hours purchased for the city. That's a lot of energy, but it is, again, it's very flat. Rates are what's driving improved position in our revenue, not load growth. Next page, please. In this page, you're going to see some pretty big numbers on that far right column. As some of you may know, we are currently in the midst of a system upgrade of about $15 million we put in financing 2 years ago. And most of that work, I think we're going to have the 69 line complete by midsummer. We're going to have sub 2 complete, no, sub 1 complete by end of fiscal year? No? Yeah, fiscal year, and then in sub 2 complete by the end of the calendar year, so we're wrapping those projects up now.
So Chuck, for
Yeah.
Terry and Dustin, the 69 line is what they're doing on Pearl, going from the south substation up to the power plant. That's the 69 line. They're replacing poles, wires, everything.
So, you know what, can you, would you fast forward?
Oh, do you have a slide in? I'm sorry, Chuck.
No, it's all right, it's actually, but I'm gonna go ahead and address it since you brought it up. Can you fast forward a couple slides and we'll just go back? Keep going. Oh, yeah, right there.
Oh.
Thank you. So, actually go back one slide. There we go. So this is the 69 line, this is the transmission system for the city of Carthage. You can see it's built in a circle. Everything from the bottom square, the yellow square, it says SPA sub at the bottom. If you go north and west, all the way around to the top little square that says sub 3, and then then from there you go along central to the east, back to the power plant. A majority of that was built in 96, I believe, 95, 96 timeframe. And that was to complete a loop in the event that something happens in your system, your substations sit on the transmission system, and in the event that something happens on one part of it, you can reroute the electricity to the other. So in the event that we have, hey, let's say a tornado hits the west side of Carthage, roughly in the space that it hit the other day, but it did destroy the transmission system that is running on the west side of that map. Then our objective would have been to reroute traffic to the substation at the top, the power plant, down to the bottom to that sub, and then back to sub 2, which is Main Street. So you can see how there's a redundancy to that system in the event of power loss. The problem that we are now structured with is that okay, now the next slide, please. Yes, perfect, thank you. So that slide, that's the substation at the bottom is the SBA, that's the Federal Power Marketing Administration substation, not ours. They usually let the weeds grow in the summertime, it's not our responsibility, it's theirs. Promise you, we tell them that on a regular basis. That substation, the line comes out of there, that's our link to the outside world. So when we buy energy off the market, or we bring it in from Sykeston or Plum Point, or what will be our partnership with the folks at Dogwood, it will come into that location. That link from there to the power plant, which is the top of that map, it was the original, okay? It was the original build out in the 1960s, and the capacity is just not there for it to handle what exactly I said here in the previous slide is in the event of a tornado or a catastrophe, and a hot day follows that, or extreme weather, we would not be able to support the entire system on that east side. So that is getting replaced. The green indicates work that has already been complete. I think it's probably improved since that NODAX. This is as of April, I think. So all of that work that is green and red will be complete by in June, I think is what our expectation is. So that explains part of the work that we were doing that Alan was mentioning in our $15 million. That is the 69 line upgrade, and then the other two upgrades would be at the top little yellow box, which is our power plant. The other would be on that map on the left side, which is substation 2. We'll talk about that in just a moment. So, you mind backing up now? Sorry, slides. I apologize. No. Is that it? All right. Capital expenditures. All right. So here is what we're looking at for 24, 25. And so some of the stuff you see in projected is the completion of the work that I just outlined. So that extends over a couple of years. The budget number that you see in front of you of 4.7 is for not everybody, let's not panic and let's not shout this from the rooftops, but that is for a solar facility. And while that is a good thing, I believe for us, it is only a good thing at a good cost. And we see we have applied for a, what's that called? CPRG grant, where we can get, and this is through the Department of Natural Resources, this is where we can get a 50% grant to pay for solar generation capability added to our system. that point, this becomes a good project. And I'll be honest, solar has improved quite a bit. Its availability is better than it used to. The cost of it has come down significantly. But at 4.7, I mean, this generally this would be a, you know, a 10 to maybe $11 million project. At 4.7, which would be our share of that, if we get this grant, we need to move forward with that. It's a great opportunity for us to put capacity behind the meter for us, which offsets costs on an annual basis, and then gives us some generation capabilities and provides a probably what's going to be a needed renewable component to our supply, our mixture, that will be driven by, more than likely, by customers that demand that. And those are generally our larger customers looking for a renewable opportunity. So that is in there. If we do not get the grant and we do not see a favorable position as an offer for a solar facility, this will be coming out of the budget. We'll find the grant process will be complete into the summer. I believe first of the fall, we should know something here in about 4 months. So that's exciting for us. It's exciting for the community. Hope it works out well, and it will be a great resource as we move forward. If you slide down a little bit, you'll see 3 different $6 million price tags, which just a little over 18, that's $19 million. That is for a substation on the south and west side of town, basically where the land is today, in that ballpark where the land was used from CDC purchased, or the city purchased land with the CDC. We partnered on that project, and the growth in the community over the last 20 years has all been, just about all of it has been on the southwest end of town. The Shriver's facility, storage facility is fantastic. We wish their load was even higher than it is, but it is. That is putting significant strain in that particular area of our system. And we need a substation on the southwest side of town, and there is a GRIP grant that is available to the Electric Commission of the state of Missouri. So basically, Carthage joined with several other municipal utilities through our state association to apply for a grant to make improvements to the reliability of your distribution system. And this is a 60-40, is that right, Kevin? 60-40? Yeah, maybe a little bit. Yeah, we would be the 37, right? 36% grant, we would have to contribute to that. So this grant, again, will also be determined by the end of the summer, I believe. And if we can get that, we will take a $20 million substation and conductor project and turn it into about a $8 million, $9 million project for us with the grant money. So this is a fantastic opportunity. One of the benefits we feel like that gives us a leg up that they told us helps tremendously is we had just completed this work to modernize the distribution system, or the transmission and distribution system, in the last 2 years. So for those systems who are making improvements, this kind of rewards them in a grant. We are combined with multiple other utilities in the state of Missouri as a part of our Electric Commission's project. So I think what happens is if we all get it, if it gets awarded, then we all get this benefit and significant money coming to Carthage. So this is another one. Now this one is a need for us. We have had this in our 10-year plan for a few years now, and if we have additional growth on the southwest side of this community, not necessarily residential, but a large industrial customer, that will really drive the need for this to be even greater. So this is coming at a fantastic time. The leg up that we have for the work that we did in the last 2 years hopefully gives us an advantage. If we do not get this grant, we will still evaluate the need of the timing for that substation. My gut would tell me that it would not necessarily happen in this fiscal year, but it's not far off as a need for the utility.
Chuck, also
Yes,
for Terry and Dustin, when Chuck talks about industrial use and we get a large industrial user, that helps offset our residential rates because they're paying, they pay a quarter per watt. We pay a quarter per watt. Well, if they use a whole lot more watts, our quarter comes down. I mean, it's not a quarter to quarter.
Economies of scale, right?
It's economies of scale, so.
Really, Carthage is very fortunate to have the industrial base that we have. There are a lot of communities in the state, you know, you see a community like Nixon that grows quite quickly and it's good system. They do not have the residential or the industrial load that we have. Their rates they struggle. It is a massive swing for them, and it's not just in rates, but it's also in your power supply agreements and how those can be structured to benefit the base load requirement of your industrial customers, but yet not really have that massive peak impact that a lot of communities that just have a residential system. Those peaks are brutal on them, and they see some pretty tremendous adjustments in their purchase power adjustment or their energy cost. Our base load driver is our industrial base, but it's the same in the water and wastewater as well. Those rates help stabilize the residential side of this community. And man, kudos to Jeff Meredith. He has done some great work for us in the last couple of years already. Stephanie Howard works with him closely. And they have others that are continuing to look at Carthage, and we have one improvement that is coming to Carthage. The weird thing about it is not a lot of those folks want that to be announced. They like to keep that a secret. I don't know if that's strategic in their jobs or as they try to attract, but we are seeing some improvement there, and we need to keep that going. But yes, we are very, very fortunate, and it is an economies of scale, and it's most evident in both two areas, rates and power supply management. Those are the areas in which you see the benefit are tremendous. Good point, Alan. Thank you for saying that. Any other questions there? In this, the rest of this, our outlay for the year, and you see it says $30 million at the bottom, and that's a lot, but of course there's a lot of that could go away based on grants. The rest of this is new and renewed services, which means replacement of and improvement of and then additional customers. We have a few distribution system upgrades that you'll see, and then just equipment, and we have a feeder 17 improvement as well. So pretty standard year for us on the electric side, minus those major costs in the solar and the substation. Next slide, please. Thank you. And here will be the impact for the rate structure for next year. You'll see the residential is the top one. Left is the existing rate going from $23.60 a month in availability to $25.10 availability. Our KWH going from $10,256 to $10,416, and then down. So you see the general service, the 1-0/ is a single phase, 33 to 35 in your availability. You see there now when you hit the general service level, you start to see tiers in what the cost of the electricity is. Those used to be greater, and there used to be a free element to that, if you can believe it. But quite frankly, in the 50s, when a lot of these rate structures were put in place, it was to the advantage of the utility to give people some free electricity so they use more, right? Well, we're not to that stage anymore. We're charging people for every kilowatt hour that they use. There's no more free, and that's just normal. A lot of folks have moved on from that. Municipals and co-ops really the biggest drivers of the free classification of services, which would have been, you had your first maybe 1,000 kilowatt hours for free or something like that. We've moved away from that. The tiers, there used to be more tiers. We've compressed those a little bit, so there is an advantage for more energy used, but not as advantageous as it was in years past. And really, in years past, it was positive to see you using more electricity because your peak energy cost did not fluctuate. In today's environment, it fluctuates rapidly, so we really need the customers to manage those peak points in time in their consumption. And in fact, some utilities are inverting there and charging more for the highest level, which generally comes at the peak point of the day. We're certainly not there, but we'll be looking at that along with every other option that's out there when it comes to how to properly manage the rate structure and revenue structure for the electric system. So the left side is current, right side is proposed. Next slide, please. We kind of get into, this is municipal lighting, area lighting, sports fields and so forth. These have a very similar adjustment in their rate structure moving up. So it's not uncommon when we make those tier adjustments to your residential, your commercial, and industrial, you see the same kind of process unfold for all the different rate classes we have in the system. Next slide, please. Oh, yeah, we got that, so, just go back one, please. Oh, yeah, so this slide again is our neighboring utilities. We first ran this report right before the board meeting in April, as we're ready to present this to the board, and it showed Ozark Electric and Barton County, what, those two? Yeah. Those two co-ops, their usage dropped significantly down. Their total costs to the customer dropped significantly. We didn't understand why. And what has happened now, and co-ops are leading this charge around the country, is that they are adding a KW charge now to their residential bill. That has traditionally been a commercial and industrial charge to capture the demand on the system. And now co-ops have found that they need that additional revenue, and that it's an appropriate process for them to capture that revenue. Now, what they've done is they've dropped some of the KWH charge. So think of it this way. When I talked a little bit earlier about your need to manage that peak energy, and whether it's the time of day or that you kick your air conditioner on, you know, and your washer and dryer and your dishwasher and all that stuff at the same time. You can kick all those things on. That creates an instant demand at your house that is significant. And the way to combat that would be to have an adjustment in your rate structure, in your KWH, to lower the KWH a little bit, but add that KW charge and demand so that you now get negatively impacted if you do all of that at one time. Our industrial customers have learned, and we've worked closely, Elvis Castor and Stephanie and Kevin and his team, and Cassandra and her team, have worked closely with our industrial customers for years to help build an understanding that you go onto your 3 o'clock production line, you need to stagger those production lines startup so that you don't have all of your equipment coming on at the same exact time. You want to start one at 3, you need to start another one at 4, you need to start another one at 5, so you don't have that instantaneous demand peak at a high point. What the hope is by creating that type of rate structure is that your residential customers will learn that same lesson. And instead of kicking on all of those things the minute you get home, you might run your washer and dryer overnight and do that, or you might manage your thermostat a little bit differently to help you alleviate that bill on your demand. Now, what we saw, and we have an employee here that was impacted. He has a property on Ozark Electric. His KWH, let's just pick a month. I'll give you an example. His usage was, I'm gonna make this up, but it gives you a pretty close reference. His bill was about $50 one month. The next month, when they implemented the demand, his consumption went down, but the heat strips kicked on a cold week, and his bill went from $50. Consumption went down in KWH. His bill went from 50 to 130. And he used less KWH. So significant changes in the industry coming as a result of demand for the residential customer.
So Chuck, these rates, this is for the KWH, it's not all in, is what you're saying?
It is all in.
It is all in.
That is it. That shows.
Okay.
So what we went back to, Tracy, that's a good point, but I didn't say it. We went back and calculated what Barton County and what Ozark did
So
in their
you-
bill to make sure that we captured that impact. Because when we took a look at this, Barton County and Ozark Electric were at the bottom. And they went, we went from the list, normal middle range to the bottom, and we didn't understand why. Well, they had just instituted that adjustment and added that KW, so it drove their total cost to the customer up.
So it's basically, do they have a customer charge as well, and
Oh, yeah,
then,
they have all those things.
and then they've implemented kind of a demand on the residential?
Yeah, so they have like we do, customer charge,
Mhm.
they have like we do, KWH charge. They've implemented now a KW charge on the residential, so it took their bill from middle
Mhm.
up. But we didn't know, so when we're looking at their KW, we're like, why is their bill so low? And it wasn't actually, we were basing that on KWH usage. in their billing rate for KWH, because they did lower their KWH, not a lot, but they did lower it some, so that it could help offset that increase in the.
To justify.
Yeah, right. But it is, you know, it is a kick in the pants, I'm sure, for the customers, and I've talked to some others that had the same thing happen. And that's the world, that's where the utility world is going, unfortunately. You know, the part of it is makes sense in helping customers understand how to manage their consumption, especially at peak times or all at once, but it is a significant impact to customers. We are not looking at that. I have a feeling that in somebody's time frame in this utility, they're gonna be looking at that. I don't know that that'll happen for me, but, or for some of us, but it could, and there are a lot of factors that can drive that, but it is not on our radar to date. But we will be evaluating the impact for sure to understand better how that works. Thanks, Tracy. Next slide, please. We did that one already, we can skip it again, this is the 69 line, then you can skip it. So this is kind of a neat little, this is what 1961 looked like on Pearl. There's what 24 looks like, a little different, as you can imagine. That bull gang is what those guys are called. Some of those guys were, you know, they're great guys. I had a chance to work with some of them at the end of their career at Carthew Electric, and they're truly great people and did a great job of building an incredible infrastructure for Carthage. But that's some of the progress that we've made. Next slide, please. I think it's just another picture of the pulling conductor on the left side in 1961, and there we are in 24 setting a pole. You can see the giant bit on the bottom of that digger on the right side, and that's going from a wooden pole to the galvanized. I know they're ugly, and I'm sorry, I hate that, but we've got to have that infrastructure in place. Next slide, please. This gives you a little bit of indication of some of the work that we're doing at our power plant, and on that slide, in the green is the area, catch up here. The green area is complete, the yellow area is some ongoing work. Won't get in too much in particular, but just that it's kind of a bird's nest back there. It's the original plant sub. Sub 1, close to the building is that outdoor switchgear. The building, hopefully you got your orientation right. You can kind of see where the power plant is, and that where the red and green, yellow, the yellow dotted lines and the red and green lines kind of meet. That is the outdoor switchgear. Making a lot of upgrades to that equipment that again is 1960s or even earlier model equipment. So this kind of gives you a little bit of an update of where we're at. The green is complete, the yellow is ongoing. On the right hand side of that picture, you can see a little substation area, and that is sub 1 1975 model transformer, and you can see what some of the work that we're doing to upgrade that facility. Next slide, please. This is the outdoor metal clad switchgear that is original, and that framework behind it is also original. Some of that is getting removed and updated. Next slide. Oh, yeah, it's on. Yeah. This shows you a little bit of the sub 1 phase 1 complete work that is left with the switchgear, and on the right is the transformer as they're making preparations to continue the under construction phase 2 of the project. Next slide, please. So here's our forecasting for electric again. We've modeled this based on a 7% inflation rate. If consumption climbs, our targeted revenue number, our targeted revenue number is 3% each one of the next 5 years. If inflation climbs, if consumption is flat, that number is going to be in that we're going to reach that revenue requirement rates. If the consumption grows a little, then we reach that number through consumption versus rates. You look down at the bottom of the page, net cash to reserve. Now, relative to some of the other departments, those are quite big numbers, but we spend that quite a bit. So your capital, it's a very capital intensive business that we're in here. So while those look like big numbers, net cash to reserves, it does not take long to spend that money. And it's just making sure that we're improving reliability. And yeah, in one tornado, we tore the tornadoes, $650,000 worth of work for us. And that week, well, it wasn't even a week, that was 3 days. So it's a very expensive business. Next page, please. All right, so here's your average bill. Go ahead, next slide. So this is kind of the one we've all been waiting for. This is what the impact to the customer is gonna be. You can see that is a 3.7. We are not gonna have an increase in our internet cost. 3.7% increase to the average customer. Last year, I think we were at 8 or more. That is I'm shocked we were able to get there, quite frankly. With known costs continuing to decline, I thought we would be looking at, again, another just under 10% in adjustment. You can see individually, you might see a little bit of an increase, at closer to the 10% from the department, but in total, you've got about, just under $10 increase to the average residential customer. I think that's, relative to where we are, where inflation is, the cost of products and everything else, I think that's a pretty fair increase. It captures what we need to do to get the work done next year, and hopefully enough beyond that. The non-demand general service below it is 2.6. Average demand below that is 4.1. Then you go to the next page, you can see 4.5 and 3.6 respectively in our industrial classification. So last year when we're looking at 7 to 10% across the board in all these. This year we're in a different position. Again, that can go for many reasons that can happen. Some of which are good management of your expenses and proper purchasing of energy. Some of that is also in conditions and weather and market conditions too that can play a role in that. Any questions about how those shape up? Let's go on to the next slide. Yeah, you can go on, please. Cash reserve. All right. Yeah. So this is a cash reserve calculation based on your first part of this. This gets a little tricky to explain because it's more of a standard in the electric world. In the utility world, it is not elsewhere. There are some very unique power components of this that kind of drive these reserve requirements. But several years back, I had Kelly work with APPA, some of the statistical folks and the rate analysis people at APPA to help drive and help build a reserve calculation so that we had the necessary funds available to us to do what we need to do and can keep a proper reserve position. Not only does that help you in a situation where you may have some tragic event like we had last week or even worse, but it also assists us and the city, since we're combined in the same bond rating classification. The better reserve policy we have, the better rating, bond rating there the city gets. So anytime we go to borrow money, our bond rating position is better. In that first column, required reserve risk range to allocate, you see a 12.3% operation and maintenance cost, basically 45 days average utility. You see power cost about 45 days, 15.65%. An RTO collateral requirement, which is a component of the RTO that we belong to, SVP. We have to have that money available as a collateral position when we are in the market. 1.8% of historical investment assets, 48.43% annual debt payment, and a total 5-year capital plan, we want to have 20%. So that is what we're saying is those are the percentages of those things that we need to have available to us at minimum, okay? So that on hand, anything above that, we can take and put back into the system. So you can see there in February 29, 13, that reserve requirement at 13.8 for electric, 1.9 for water, wastewater at 2.2, and communication comes in at 1.5 for a total of 19.52. That's the minimum recommended reserve. At the bottom of the page, you can see it's just a kind of reasonableness calculation that we follow of a 220 days cash on hand. Again, that really is there to kind of drive home the positive bond position that we want to achieve when that time comes, and to make sure that what we're looking at percentage-wise is reasonable. Another note that in this policy, when we created this policy, if we fall below the minimum requirement, it requires board action to take. So we can't just have this policy in place and simply ignore it, when the numbers aren't coming in where they are. We have the numbers in place, and if the numbers are falling below the required position, then it will require a board action to take. And they will say, we're gonna monitor this maybe and make an adjustment somewhere between the departments, or we're gonna look at an adjustment in rates to cover the reserve requirement that we built. So it will trigger that discussion with the board. And we talk to the board about this about 4 times a year. And then the next page, this is kind of where we sit. You can see on the left-hand side, you can see your June 30, 23 numbers, and then February 29 and 24. The minimum reserve required is 13.8. Today, our unrestricted cash balance is 17.3. So that delta is 3.5. That's money we can use to put back into the system, if that makes sense, right? We're not going below 13.8 because that is our required position. And again, that number may change, not the percentage, but what is required may change. The SPP may come to us and say they need an increase in their RTO collateral position. We've got to meet that so that we can get energy into the system. So below that is in the allocation of restricted cash. That is what is restricted for financing requirements. So you have a $12.3 million restriction in our restricted cash position. So we can't touch that money, right? So that leaves us with a total of $29 million, $29.7 million on electric. And as you see across this, it's the same model all the way. You have a $1.5 million flexibility position in your water to utilize in your infrastructure. You have $600,000 in wastewater. Again, it does not take long. As you can see by our $2 million wastewater project, we get 12 miles, but it doesn't take long to spend $600,000. We're a little bit low in our reserve position there. In communications, again, I think we're being very, very conservative. You see a loss there. We have an interdepartmental loan process in place that is tracking any money borrowed from the communication needs to meet their requirements for capital expenditures being borrowed on the electric side. So it is tracked and then repaid back to the electric. That is not something you see in a lot of utilities. It's a lot of systems will just take money and never see it again, right? So we've got to make sure that we're doing the right thing there and make everyone whole at the end of the day. And on the right side, you see the total number as you cross. Any questions about the reserve requirement? The next page, please. The next page is your forecasted. This is kind of the same thing that we looked at now for a few times on the departments. This is just your reserve position requirement again. I know that communication looks awful. We believe we're going to beat that. Very conservative numbers. We'll come in better than that. This is just a financial model for us to go off of. And it may mean that we need to come back with some rate adjustments somewhere or different classifications to meet a market position that is not that's not yet met, but very conservative overall. And then the next page, please. Summary, yes, ma'am. In this page, you can see the projected actual for fiscal year 23-24 to the left. You see the loss on the communication side, but positive for the other departments. And again, some of these things are a timing issue. This is your cash flow position, right? A lot of this can be a timing. You do capital expenditures in this. Some of this are projects that have not yet hit the books that we carry over, so that's why they look more positive at some point in time throughout your cash flow. But generally speaking, it's very healthy, and it should be based on the rates that we got, that we approved last year and what we're expecting to this year. On the right-hand side, you see the budget summary that points to where we expect to go next year. Transfer to the city of a 1.4 million over, so the city's going to see just $150,000 increase in total next year. For the transfer to the city, allocated 1.1 million from electric, 131,000 for water, 116,000 for wastewater, and 66,000 for the communications department as they continue to grow. We do see a net cash to reserves as a negative, and those water, wastewater, and communications. Again, you could take the opportunity to raise rates high enough to see that negative go to positive. I generally believe that we're going to see consumption climb back to some normal levels, and And if that happens, then we'll be in good shape. And then that will help cover that, that negative position in those. And then below that, you can see the principal payments that are required for each one of those departments as well. We have $1.4 million annual principal payment in total, for the financing of different projects. Water has no financing, wastewater and electric have, decent numbers, and communication has about $117,000 a year in financing requirements. That includes the report. It's only 810. I'm sure some of you, what? Okay, that's right. So it's, as you, in your book, and I think that's it on the show, but in the book, you'll see the budget detail, which that is our budget, right? So what we just went over is kind of an overview of the budget, so that you get the details, the items that you need. And then after that, the summary page that we just talked about is the actual budget itself. And then following that is your electric rate, or your rate book and the adjustments that are being made. So as you go to approve this budget that the board approved last month, it will take into account basically everything that's in this budget, from the adjustments in rates, to the budget, and the, well, that's it. Takes into account all that. The last thing I want to do mention to you is that the adjustment that we did not know what to expect with the compensation study when we started that process. And we put in money in this budget to address that. And right now, let's cross our fingers, it appears that we're going to be inside the range to get our employees into range with the compensation study without any additional increase in the budget. That is a positive. And I think it goes to say where we were in line, and certainly what we have to do moving forward. We're going to be able to meet that and not have additional increase in our rate structure for to meet that requirement.
How much of an increase did you budget?
I'm sorry?
How much of an
About
increase
700,000.
percentage?
That's about 11%, maybe in that range.
Okay.
10 to 11%, I think, what the number is of our payroll. And our payroll is a big number. $700,000 is a lot of money, but you spread that over about 90 employees, it goes pretty quick. But that's where it is. But again, all of that is included in the all of the expenses that you have listed in front of you in the budget. One of the things that we do need to make sure is very clear is that in our accounting process, in 15-minute increments, every hour for every employee is accounted for. And one unique thing about how the accounting works for a municipal utility utilizing FERC guidelines is that you can spend 30 minutes on that project and 30 minutes on this project, and those account numbers get charged that amount. And additionally, we have a significant, as you can imagine, number of percentage of compensation allocated to capital expenditures. So as our folks are going back, making capital improvements in the system, that compensation is capitalized, and it is capitalized at all levels, including benefits now, as we've made that allocation adjustment. So all hours, all time is accounted for every employee, and that is split up in the accounts appropriate for the work they're doing. And we have employees that will see their time ticket will have 15 to 20 different accounts they'll charge time to on a weekly basis. So it's pretty significant, pretty complex. It's a major process for us, but we train our folks to do the right thing there and make sure they get it done right. It can be very complex. It doesn't, your lineman may not just have one account to charge time to. They'll have dozens of accounts to charge time to, depending on the work that they're doing in the system. And that goes for everybody. I think it's enough.
Questions?
I did see the bucket truck, I don't know, probably
Yeah.
how many times back, but, is that 4 years out? Is that?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
We haven't gotten last year.
Last year's not even a blip on the radar. They won't even talk to us about it. In fact, we've got notification from some of our fellow APPA and NRC members that they're canceling bucket truck contracts and moving on to somebody else who's willing to pay more. stand our ground and say, well, we're unwilling to do this, you're gonna give us this, what we say, they put it in every clause anymore has an out for any of the suppliers for us, transformers, meters, that storm damaged a lot of meters on our system, and we are 3 months out before we receive additional supply of meters.
We're hoping next month we get a shipment, but we haven't been, it's not been confirmed.
I mean, it's
We've been waiting for something.
procurement is tight on everything we do right now, and it's not just a $280,000 bucket truck that was 120, 5 years ago. It's everything, and everything's more expensive, and the procurement times are tighter and tighter. We do not have any leeway, and we can't tell people, well, we're not going to sign that contract because they'll take somebody else and mark it up 15%. They'll get a better deal, and we have to take what's available to us. We have an incredible procurement team with Kelly Steinbrook, Diane, not Showalter. Southern, yeah, as she's married now, and Ivy Hart, who was here earlier this evening. They do a fantastic job of managing, $10 million or more of purchases a year for us in inventory, along with Jim Willis, and it's a job, and they do a really good job of managing that. But it is a cutthroat business right now in the supply to utility infrastructure at all levels. Elbows, I mean, cheap little things that used to cost us 50 cents cost us $8 a day. We use them all the time. So there's a war we're in, where it's not, the city sees it too, and a bunch of things they have to do with. Everybody is. But
So
I'm very proud of our procurement process.
Chuck, the wastewater improvement project, are they gonna coat the inside,
Yeah.
the inside of the line like they did the water line? Is that?
Yeah, well, this
or
is the
similar?
process we've been doing all along now, and so
Oh.
the water line thing that we did a couple of years ago was a spray-in lining that kind of looks like what we've been doing in wastewater now for 20 years. I mean, I've been there now almost 30, and we've been doing it for probably 25 of those years. It's been a version of that,
Okay.
and that project looked a little like it, and how it sprayed and cured in line, and this is the same. This is a similar process. It's just the way it's done is just a little different, but it is the same thing. It's a relining of the line to stop the I-9. So everything around it.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you, sir.
You bet.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you,
Any
Sam.
questions you may have, don't hesitate to reach out.
Can we have a mic?
Thank you.
Yes. Let's take a 10-minute break.
Tim.
reconvene. Do we need a motion to forward their budget to council for approval at this time, or do we wait until?
You can, what we do is we just put it in on the same council bill.
Right, but we'll need a motion to. So I would entertain a motion to forward the budget to council for approval.
I move that we forward the budget to council for approval.
Motion to forward council to approval. Any discussion?
The CWEP budget.
This Carthage Water and Electric budget. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Well, motion carried. Now we need a motion to forward the rate increase to council also. I would entertain a motion to forward the rate increase to council for approval.
I move that we forward the CWMEP rate increase to council for approval.
Motion to forward the CWEP rate increase to council for approval. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. So, Tracy, you've made changes.
I did,
from our
as we
discussion
discussed.
the other night.
The other one, I did make some changes. I did move the honor guard for the fire department up to 2025. The Little League, we discussed that and got that budget out to you. I sent it an email last night. Did you get it? Okay. So that was all included. The public health is still one that we had talked about. The LEFAC, I put it on a 5-year note at 6%. That payments $30,000 a year. The fund, even by doing that, is still $71,651 negative, and that's without including the $7,500 that we had discussed on the Humane Society. So,
And Tracy, I think Dustin and Terry, I explained to them that you made changes in the system, but those changes don't roll forward fast enough to be able to print out.
no, it's not that. If I make a change in the system, it automatically updates across the board. Because the system is new, any accounts that are added, I have to do a spreadsheet, send it to them, and they have to put it in.
Okay.
But it takes 5 business days right now. So, it's not, I mean, that's why I can't get exact, I mean, but I can tell you what the numbers will be. So, general fund, I have that wrote down. I actually texted that to Greg, so I'm going back to that.
352.
Thank you. General fund, with all of the changes with the Little League and everything, we're at a loss of $352. And, but the public health fund, like I said, 71,000, and so it will pull from the reserves. There is 573,000 in the public health fund. So it's not going to create a problem this year, but we do need to figure out something to do with the public health fund in order to keep it from going negative. We have to have sustainability in that fund. I also, you wanted me to look into the dog and cat license that we do. We bring in $1,500 a year on revenue, so that's not going to be much help to the Humane Society there. Other than that, there's really not anything. Myers Park is negative, but that's a carryover project, so it's actually in the previous fiscal year allocations, so that doesn't affect this year. And then the remaining negative is in the use tax, and that's because the funds have been collected now and they're going to be expended in the next fiscal year.
Anything else? We did discuss, you and I discussed, Tracy and I discussed having another meeting to finalize, and we will have to print out, and we'll be able to go through and look at the numbers. We discussed,
We were going to do June 5th, but there's already another meeting that's being scheduled for that, so we moved it up to June 3rd,
so,
Monday, June 3rd. Do you know, will there be a P&Z meeting that night?
No, I think they've had to cancel and make it June 20th, I think is where they're at. PNC.
Julie rescheduled.
Okay, so June 3rd would be available. What time are you available to start a meeting?
After 5 would be great.
So
5:30 would be.
5:30.
5:30, okay.
Okay, so 5:30 on June 3rd will be our next meeting. At that point is when we will make the motion to forward the budget, or if there are any changes that we,
No, if you want to make any changes, they need to be made tonight.
okay,
Because it takes too much time and we have to have it ready for the next council meeting. So we do need to discuss the agency contracts and make sure, get those approved. I need to know what you want to do on those, but no, any changes that need to be made for the budget for the next fiscal year need to be discussed tonight, because we won't be able to make changes after the next meeting. So if you have any concerns, please speak now.
When we spoke, I can't remember now which time, when we talked about the Humane Society, the thought was to try to increase the licensing fees, correct?
yes.
Okay.
But at this point,
I have some numbers that I would like to share with you if I can find them really quick. I sent yesterday. So our contract is for how many animals? 325?
360.
360?
360.
Okay, so we met our contract in December. So anything after December is when we start paying. So at the end of April, we owe an additional $6,500. However, in January, they only took 1 animal. In February, they took 11. March, they took 23. In April, they took 14, compared to 50 to 65 even in 1 month is normal. So at this point, we don't know what the Humane Society is going to do going forward. We don't know if they're only gonna take a few animals a month, or if they're going to be able to take, go back to the normal average of 50 to 65, animals a month.
Can you remind me of what that amount is per animal after that's?
It's basically $100 per animal. And when going back to the licensing question you asked Mr. Snow, well, that's $1,500, but you got to remember the licensing fee might be $0 or it might be $5. If we raise it to 50 and
Right.
part of that goes to them, it's not going to be a windfall, but it might be something.
so,
Sorry, that's 0 for a.
If you're spay and neuter, you come and get your tag, or you get it at your vet, it's $0. If it's not, it's $5 is what the ordinance reads right now. So that's why we were thinking, well, Chief can answer, but 50 and 25. And that would get, if part of that went to the Humane Society, that would help a little.
so one of the things that we've discussed in years past, and now we have 3-year contracts, is that it's difficult to negotiate contracts when we're talking budgeting time. So we have a 3-year contract that does have a 3% escalation each year in it. So right now, it's difficult to negotiate, or basically to give them more money would be negotiating a new contract. So I would prefer that we keep the contracts in the budget the way that they currently are, and that's with all all the agency contracts, the Humane Society, the Vision Carthage, and the Chamber. Keep the contracts where they're at
And the why?
and the Y. Keep the contracts at the levels that they are with their escalation, 3%. And then after the budget, we can look at those contracts, because I think all of them have different things that they're asking for, which means that we need a new contract in order for those things. So we keep the budget, what the contract currently is, and then once we get the budget adopted, we revisit those contracts after the first of the fiscal year, and we can always come back and,
Can we go ahead and, if we have an attorney to approve the contract, make the changes that we discussed with the chamber? The amount's not going to change, but the allocation changed. Is it okay to proceed with that?
I would say, yeah, the dollar amount's not gonna change.
Okay.
So, I mean, if we wanna go ahead and revisit that contract at this point, because we did talk with them yesterday about a new contract, but there was no change in the dollar amount. So I would say
If we possibly can.
yeah, if we can get that, because obviously there are changes that need to be made. But, so that would be my suggestion, is that we get the budget finalized for the first fiscal year, for July 1st, and then we visit with the pet licensing ordinance and increasing pet licensing fees, and look at what that is going to generate, and then we can look at giving the Humane Society more money. So,
If they're taking our animals.
yeah.
Because, I mean, technically, the way the contract is right now, they are not meeting the contract requirements.
Even like, to further your point, yesterday morning, because we stay in pretty constant contact with them, like how many runs or kennels that they have available for us. Yesterday was 0. They had nothing available for us. We could have took an animal out there if anyone called, or if we caught one. We have no place to take it at this point. They're not upholding, like Tracy said, they're not upholding their end of the bargain.
Right.
What happens in that situation when we don't have anywhere to take it?
Well, we have
You make the
tried
citizens
various
very
things.
unhappy.
We have called Lamar, which they're very gracious on occasion to take a couple animals, but they're also very small. We've tried Joplin. The last several times we've tried them, they've also told us all they can do is handle what Joplin gets them, and they can't take additional. But we've tried various things. We're to the point now where we did, unless it's an aggressive dog or injured, something of that nature that truly needs, like, I hate to say emergency assistance, but you get my point. We just don't do anything. If it's just an average dog at large, we just leave it. We get several complaints about that. Probably not as much as we used to, but because the word has spread that that they're not taking animals anymore.
So when the posts are made for like a found animal and the location or address, are those pictures taken at the Humane Society?
Well, my animal control, if I understand your question correctly, my animal control officer, when he gets a call like that, and maybe I should have said this earlier, sometimes he drives through the neighborhood looking for, if the animal, sometimes they'll even lead you back to their own house. He'll go door to door sometimes. He'll put it on Facebook, say, does anyone know this animal, where it belongs? He's pretty good about trying to return animals to their home.
No, I mean like an actual post where it looks like they're in a kennel.
They also do their thing as well, but that's entirely different than what we do.
Okay. On the licensing fee, it was $1,500, so that would be the non-spayed or neutered. Do we have a number or an idea of what the spayed and neutered would be?
Oh, no.
Because it's a
no.
$0 fee now. Do you know if there's a listing or
Well,
registration?
how many licenses do we?
I just know the revenue's 1,500. I will get the.
We'll do the research on that. All the
We buy
li-
tags, right? The city buys
Right.
the tags.
and all that all goes into one place. We could separate them out though, and let you know how many licenses we've given.
Just curious if that,
It's a good question.
makes it a substantial assist.
It's a good question.
It is.
And also remember, when we approve the Humane Society contract as is, it is already vastly over budget.
Yeah.
So you're not really approving that number. You're really approving that number plus, which again, okay, but that's what we're doing.
Right. And, I mean, I hate to say it, but in the 6 years, Chief's been here, Greg was here, Tracy's been here. In the 6 years that I've been on the budget committee, every year they've come and told us that they're about 6 months from closing their doors, you know? So I hate that we can't give them more, but they also, it's their business to run, and the city cannot fully afford to fund their entire business plan.
Well, especially if they aren't going to take our animals.
And yeah, and if they're not
And
taking
at
it,
this point, we don't know what they're going to be capable of doing and not doing. And I know Greg talked to them about offering, you know, in-kind services
Yeah,
and,
we
and
definitely need
helping
to try
them.
that.
And so, you know, if there's something we can do to help them to get back to where they can, you know, take more animals, we certainly will.
If we could find a way to increase capacity out there through helping them do some stuff, I still think that's a great idea. I think the licensing fees are a great idea as well.
so you kind of see where I mean, the other night we suggested a $7,500 increase for a spay and neuter program. But I think that would require a change to the contract, which at this time, if we just pass the contract as it currently is, there wouldn't be a need for a change in the contract. We can revisit the contract, like I say, after the start of the fiscal year, because I've never believed that budget time is the time to negotiate contracts, because we have a deadline that the budget needs to be done. They have to go back and negotiate the contract with their board and get their contract approved and all those kind of things. So it's kind of a difficult time to get all those things happening before our budget needs to be approved next month. So I would entertain a motion to, well, I guess I don't need a
Keep
motion.
the amounts, well, in the budget, we'll keep the amounts the same.
Keep the amount of the contract the same, and the $7,500 that we talked about the other night will just be taken out.
Okay.
Can I ask how you feel about the in-kind office donation for Vision, since it won't increase there? Do you want me to try to work that in or no?
I'll say they were excited about that when I went to their board meeting there. I think that was last week.
It would be helping them out a lot and not cost us any, you know, I mean, it kind of does, we're giving space, but it wouldn't increase the budget.
Right, but it would still, would we need that in a new contract?
I would just suggest we amend we just add an amendment since it's zero. But again, I will leave that up to you guys, whatever you want me to do.
Well, I mean, do we have an attorney that can,
Yes.
we do have?
Lawbor has agreed to write our council bills to get all the budget and everything done.
Okay.
I think, do you have something, Abby? You wanted?
Well, I was just gonna say, we've got an MOU with the coroner, and we could easily create an MOU for them as well, to just make it simpler. If we don't wanna attach it to the contract, we just do an MOU. I don't know how you feel about that, but it's easy for us.
Do it that way too, yeah.
Is there advantages one way or the other, or disadvantages?
I guess the advantage of an MOU is it's not in the contract, so an MOU, I think, would probably be a little bit easier if we decided to change and say, hey, the office thing's not working out. We give them a time to basically move, and then, you know, rather than having to terminate the contract. So an MOU would be an easier direction.
On the coroner MOU, we put in there that we would reevaluate at certain periods, so we could do that with them as well.
So do I need a motion for an MOU?
Well, not necessarily. If you guys want to do it, we'll write it and put it on the agenda.
Okay. And did the MOU with the coroner ever, I don't remember it coming to council.
No, it's really, remember when I told you guys that we offered them office space because of the flooding? There's really kind of isn't really an MOU. It's kind of a letter that basically says, I got the mayor and council to agree to offer you office space and we'll reevaluate in 6 months. So I think that letter maybe went into correspondence, but I don't think you guys ever really voted on it.
Okay, so I
Now-
would say,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Now, if we continue that, we will need an MOU for you guys, I think.
I'm okay with the MOU.
That makes sense.
okay, so we just include an MOU in the budget packet or
Yes, yeah, we'll just write an MOU and it'll be-
contract, I guess,
Mhm.
when we
Yeah.
forward the contract. Okay.
Okay, so the MOU then for Vision Carthage will go as an MOU. We are not increasing, other than the 3%, we're not doing anything else on the Humane Society, and we will consider the reallocation on the chamber if we can get someone to look into that.
The Y has no stair step.
They do not.
So it'll stay the
So-
same. Senior center, it does, but that doesn't need much negotiation, so.
It didn't increase.
Right.
They always stay under budget.
Well, I just think, we've asked all our department heads to keep their operating budgets at the same level as last year with salary increases. And I don't see the benefit to us to give any agencies an increase unless we redo a contract and find other funding methods.
Well, and to your point, sir, you know that when we were, whatever it was, 1.2 million or whatever over that day, they all volunteered to cut. So they all have taken cuts. So that is a very salient point.
I do have one more question. I'm verifying the amount that I have in the budget. Just kind of brought to light, the conversations that, with the salary study with CWEP, and she said that, they should be updated every 2 to 3 years. And I have 10,000 in the budget to just kind of do a spot check, but I don't know if that's going to be enough based on what Lockton, said as far as it might need, more evaluation since the market is changing so rapidly. So should we increase that a little more to do more than just a look-see, as she said?
When was the last time that was done?
2000, or
2020.
Wow.
2000, a long time ago, 2020. It went into effect October of 2020.
So this is, the 4-year period she's talking about. This is the end of it. We have taken all of her recommendations. We've kept up with the CPI. We've given the steps. But as Chuck wisely just pointed out, that doesn't mean that on certain jobs, depending on the market demand, that we've kept up. She offered, if you know Victoria, she's a very nice lady. I could see her offering to take a look-see, because that is something she would say, and just tell us if there were certain positions that were off. But now I too am wondering if maybe we ought to ask her to look a little more in depth.
I don't recall, and I know Jen is here, but we didn't have that position in our original salary study, did we?
No, but we did follow, she has a whole point system. Whatever your job description is, that we can point it and put it in the salary study. So we did follow her system to put it in. But no, she hasn't actually looked at that position.
We've got, and that does bring up another, topic. So we did separate Jen's position into, the lodging tax for the tourism, and then we also created the PIO, department. So that would change her job description, and so we do need to change her job description if that is approved as well. Again, I don't think $10,000 is going to be enough to look at all of the departments that I feel, need to be looked at.
Why don't
All
we
of the
call
positions.
Victoria and by the next meeting, have maybe a better estimate from her? Is that a good idea? Cause I do think we want her to look at each position.
Because she did it before, she has the knowledge, she has the job description, she has all of the information. So that's why it's best just to stick with her.
Yeah, plus we have a recreation director that we didn't have during that salary study
I
time.
don't think you had an assistant city administrator
Yeah.
at that time.
I think there's maybe 5 or 6 positions that we
So there
pointed
are some
according to her.
positions.
Yeah,
Yes.
we followed her directions in pointing them but
We
she did
created
not
The
look at
one
them.
over in the, Public Works,
Right,
what's that one?
That code enforcement.
at the
We
code
had that
enforcement,
one.
but that was an equivalent position, we
Yeah,
already had that one.
we had that one.
Yeah, but there's some others though that we have.
Yeah, I think there's probably 5 or 6 if we look at them all that
So, yeah,
change somehow.
so I would suggest you call Victoria and find out what it would cost to figure out how many new positions we have, because since the salary study, look at those. And
She was doing a salary study for, I don't remember.
Up by Kansas City, is that
She
right?
was doing a salary study and we were used as a comparable, and so we would get the information, and she said that she could use that to update if we needed to. So I think that will help
Yeah.
speed the process up as well.
so it would be a little bit more than just a look-see.
Yes, sir.
Exactly.
Yes,
So
sir.
yeah, if you could find out what that would.
We'll do that. And I think as was previously pointed out, none of these, I don't think we're gonna find any of these positions are overpaid. I'm afraid of the exact opposite. And it comes out of the general fund. However, we've had this conversation a million times. To keep good employees, you have to be competitive. So
She was doing one for Kirkwood.
Kirkwood, that's right.
They were part of ours.
I saw that.
Yeah, no, you're gonna find employees who are significantly underpaid. That would be my guess. Just, I think the rapid time.
It is, and like I said before, that, in the past, municipalities have not been known for their pay, they were always known for their benefits. But now they're having to become more competitive in the salary market because of the remote positions and just everything. The inflation has just really spiked the salaries up.
But yeah, I mean, we have tried to keep up, so.
Yes, we have.
We've done, I think that first year we did 7.
Mm-hmm.
Then
We
the
have had
second
a-
year we did 6, and
Whatever
last year
the
we did
CPI was.
5.5, I think.
I mean, Victoria's actually told us that she's impressed with us because she says most cities don't listen to her.
Yeah.
However, she says certain jobs, the demand is just, we're going to be behind on them, even though we've done everything we could do.
I constantly talk about the 6 years I've been on this committee. I remember there were a couple of years where we did a step and no COLAs and, 2.5%.
And
So
that cost us big time
it did. So,
to catch up.
yeah. Okay, anything else that,
I'll throw out, Mr. Snow, I think if you guys are going to make no significant changes, we can actually start making the budget books. We can actually start, as you remember last budget season, because of OpenGov, that was a disaster. We can actually, by this next meeting, actually have you something very substantial to look at.
So again, if you have any concerns about the budget, please express them tonight.
Would having that information readily available by Monday be enough time for you
It's
then?
a week from Monday.
Like I said, week from.
I will send out an email when I get the information and make sure that you're okay with me putting that amount, whatever amount it is, in the budget.
Tracy, one recommendation or request I would have, because the budget book will look like what we had the other night. Print out.
No.
No?
It's gonna
Oh.
look a little different.
It'll look a little different?
Yeah, it's
Because
actually,
the
yeah.
headers at the tops of the pages,
So last year, OpenGov had like the totals at the top, and it was a mess, but no, it is going to be a much better book,
Okay.
and we will start looking at it. This, I've already put like fund balances in, it will calculate the fund balances once we start submitting everything. There will be some changes, on the salary line items, based on, so when our budget process starts, Michael Miller, he takes the time, goes through, and he has the title of each position. And like, we split Jen's position into 2 categories. So like, lodging tax, that amount will go down because it wasn't split. So there will be some changes in the salary line items on a few, but it's just, because something has changed since it was actually put in the first time.
ClearGov actually makes a beautiful budget book,
no.
so should be a lot more organized than what you saw.
Any other changes, anyone?
One question for Abby. Any thoughts around the winter kill, if you want to call it that, in the fairways?
Any thoughts? In what capacity? I'm not sure of the question.
The winter kill in the fairways, just thinking about that piece of it, the fairway part, or the areas of the fairway that have died in the winter. Doesn't look like those are coming back. Any thoughts around seeding or anything that we need to consider before this is finalized?
So we are talking to the insurance company about the sprigging and seeding of the acreage that has been damaged. Right now, it's sitting at 3.5 acres that I know of that need to be cared for. So we're looking into what that entails and making sure the insurance will sign off on that before we make that purchase. But am I properly answering your question? Are you talking about overall the winter kill? Because I mean, I know, I'm aware of that, but I don't have a proposal as far as how to remedy that at the moment.
Yeah, no, and I'm not expecting that by any means. Just is it on the radar, and do we need to include it? But it sounds like you're looking towards insurance.
So I think maybe they're 2 separate things.
Yeah, not the any tree damage or anything like that. Just the areas in the fairway. I could just, we've got the opportunity to address it now, if it needs to be in budget.
I mean, I'm never gonna say no to some help there. I mean, yes, the guys have been complaining about it and we have recently discussed that it is a problem and it doesn't seem to be coming back in a timely manner. So I don't have an amount of, I don't have any sort of cost estimates on what that might take to do that. So I'm not prepared to answer the question tonight. I apologize, but it is something that we need to look into.
Yeah, and that's just more observational. I'd hate to see decline in rounds or people wanting to utilize the.
So I know we have more POANA this year than we have had in the past, and it's pretty substantial.
No, I'm just specifically the areas that have the winter kill.
Yeah.
And I'm using that term broadly.
Yes.
Yeah.
I will throw in, especially with you being new to the council. So whenever we have a tornado like this, we do, that emergency proclamation that you guys approved does allow us to go through emergency purchasing procedures. We will do everything possible to get the parks, golf course, everything up to the way it was before the storm. Then we will, FEMA will pay us back, some amount of it many years later. So you are probably going to see a large, it's just like Chuck said, we spent a lot of money in a very short time. If it's part of the storm, it will be up to where it was before. If it's not, because I don't play golf, so I don't know what you're talking about. But if it's not, that'll be a different issue.
Yeah, it's not part.
Okay.
It's actually the broad term is winter kill. It just died in the winter and not coming back. And they're in really core areas. And because I play, people have asked me about it, and just thought I'd take the opportunity.
Yeah.
So
Sounds
the
like-
reason for the winter kill is that we had such a mild winter, and so there was a lot of play over the winter, and the golf carts, you know, just go through the fairway, even though we have rules about turning it a 90 degree and, you know, trying to care for it, but that, you know, didn't happen when there's a lot of play necessarily. So that's why we're seeing it more this year than last year.
Department heads, any comments you would like to make about the budget?
Nothing from me.
I need $10,000 for landscaping. Whoops. It's not in my budget, but we need to think about that in the future as we work towards.
You added it.
Huh?
You added it.
I did add it?
Yes.
Okay, well, got what I wanted then.
So,
You actually had a savings on your gasoline line item.
Right.
And I used that to apply to the maintenance.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Sorry, I missed that.
so where are we with insurance company from storm damage? Have they been down to assess? Have they made any
Yep.
initial?
They're great to work with, but I'm going to ask Dorothy because she's the one that talks to them every day to update you on that.
I've been sitting in the claims as they've been coming in and the estimates, and they're generally they're easy to work with. They're very much like, just get it done and we'll worry about the reimbursement when they reimburse us, but they're very amenable.
They're talking about like a revenue loss, you know, replacing some of that for the golf course. Really, I think anything that was actually damaged, they are pretty much like, go for it and we'll worry about it later.
Yeah, the only thing that we've had, even with the seating, they're looking into that. They want to know the amounts from the tournament losses so that we can get reimbursed for that. But the trees are the only thing that we've gotten a little bit of kickback on, because they'll generally only pay for the trees that are on sidewalks or roads, not that have just fallen over somewhere. But on the golf course, it's a little bit different because it's all, you know, used by the taxpayer. So they're offering us, I think, $50 a tree, up to $50,000 in either removal or replanting for that. So.
Which is better than nothing, because I thought it'd be nothing for the golf course and parks. So
Yeah, and one of the tornado sirens was damaged, and we only had a sole source estimate on that because a lot of people don't work on tornado sirens, and I was a little worried about that, but they said to go ahead and get it fixed. So
you'll see that's an emergency purchase. You'll see, but I think it was like 17,000.
Yeah, just say already. I think we've already seen that one, haven't we?
They told us about it.
Oh,
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen it because but yeah, you'll see that because we got to fix our storm siren, but it was damaged in the storm. So now I don't know how they're going to feel about our rates when all this is over, but right now they're treating us quite well.
And no word back from SEMA yet, or the governor?
So I've been in touch with our Region D representative, and he still hasn't heard anything as far as the governor. And if that does not go through, which he is not 100% sure it will, there has to be a certain amount of damage and money across the state, obviously. He has tried to guide us towards another one, which he's calling it a 50-50, and he thinks that we can just do like a debris removal. So like, I don't know, I've got it at my desk, but the money that we spent for the chipper, any time that's outside of normal working hours, they want that. They want how much wear and tear was on the trucks, how many trucks took so many loads, all of that. So we're trying to keep track of all that. So if the state of emergency doesn't go through, which would be the best thing. If it does not, then he's got a second idea of going through this, I guess it would be a smaller one, and they would try to reimburse us for 50 to 60% of our city's cost on debris removal.
Staff reports?
I just wanna remind you to, be aware that this is, any budget adjustments, you know, in the next fiscal year, any budget adjustment that comes forward is going to go, it comes from the reserves. So they should not be, you know, just taken lightly, and they should be very necessary when we do that.
Insurance, can you remind me when the deductible goes up? Was it 25?
July 1.
Oh, FY, okay.
Okay. Anything else, Terry? Dustin? I guess I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, motion carried.